Story 1. The Mirror Convoy. Jake Patterson had been driving long haul for 17 years, and in all that time, he developed certain habits that kept him sane on those endless stretches of highway. One of them was checking his mirrors every 30 seconds like clockwork. It was February 2019, and he was hauling a load of electronics from Portland to Minneapolis along I-90, fighting through a late winter storm that had reduced visibility to maybe 50 yards at best. The snow came down in thick, swirling sheets, and the road was that dangerous kind of slick where black ice hid beneath a thin layer of powder. Jake kept his speed at 45, well below the limit, hands tight on the wheel of his Freightliner Cascadia. The CB radio crackled with occasional warnings from other drivers about jackknifed rigs and closed rest stops, but mostly it was just static and the howl of wind battering his cab. That's when he first noticed the truck behind him. It appeared in his side mirror around 11 p.m., maybe 200 yards back, matching his speed exactly. Nothing unusual about that. Lots of truckers convoy up during bad weather, using each other's taillights as guides through the whiteout conditions. Jake didn't think much of it at first. The truck looked like a standard Peterbilt, older model with a dark-colored cab and a trailer that seemed to fade in and out of the snow. 20 minutes passed, then 40. The truck maintained that exact same distance, never gaining, never falling back, just hovering there in his mirror like a ghost. Jake adjusted his speed a few times, testing. When he slowed to 35, the truck behind him slowed. When he pushed back up to 50 on a clearer stretch, the truck accelerated to match. Probably just being cautious, Jake muttered to himself, taking a pull from his thermos of coffee. The bitter taste did nothing to settle the unease beginning to knot in his stomach. But then he noticed something that made his hands go cold despite the heater blasting in his cab. The truck behind him had no visible exhaust. On a night this frigid, every diesel engine should have been pumping out thick clouds of white vapor, visible even through the snow. Jake's own stacks were billowing like chimneys, but the truck behind him showed nothing, just darkness and that barely visible silhouette. He grabbed his CB handset. "This is Nighthawk eastbound on I-90, mile marker 278. Got a Peterbilt about 200 yards on my tail. Driver, you reading me? Static." He tried again, switching through channels. Nothing but empty air and interference. The next rest stop was 40 miles ahead according to his GPS, but Jake decided he needed to pull over, let this weird truck pass, and shake off whatever paranoia was creeping up his spine. He spotted a runaway truck ramp coming up and activated his turn signal, starting to decelerate. In his mirror, the truck behind him also activated its turn signal, the same side. At the exact same moment, Jake's heart started hammering. He canceled the turn, staying on the highway, and the truck behind him did the same, its turn signal blinking off in perfect synchronization. He tried it again a mile later, signaling right, and watched in growing horror as the truck behind him mirrored the action instantly. "What the hell?" Jake whispered, his breath coming faster now. He turned off his turn signal and grabbed the CB again, cycling through every channel, calling out for any driver, anyone who could confirm they were seeing what he was seeing. The radio gave him nothing but static that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of his heartbeat. That's when Jake noticed something even more impossible. He had various stickers and markers on his truck, including a distinctive orange reflective strip he'd placed on his passenger side mirror after scraping it in a tight loading dock. It helped him judge distances in the dark. The truck behind him had the same orange strip, in the exact same location. Jake's mouth went dry. He squinted into his mirror, trying to make out more details through the snow. The more he looked, the more familiar the truck seemed. The positioning of the lights, the shape of the grille, even what looked like a small dent in the front bumper that he'd gotten 2 years ago in a parking lot in Omaha. The truck behind him was identical to his own. Panic rising, Jake floored the accelerator, pushing his rig up to 60, then 65, faster than was safe in these conditions. His trailer fishtailed slightly, and he had to fight to keep control. In his mirror, the other truck matched his speed effortlessly, maintaining that same 200-yard distance like it was tethered to him by an invisible rope. He tried slowing down rapidly, hitting his Jake brake, bringing his speed down to 20 miles per hour. The truck behind him slowed in perfect unison, never closing the gap, never falling back. "This isn't real," Jake said aloud, his voice shaking. "This isn't happening." But it was happening. He reached over and grabbed his phone, thinking he'd call 911, report something, anything. The screen was dead. Not off, but showing a strange gray static like an old TV with no signal. He tried restarting it, but it wouldn't respond. The CB suddenly crackled to life, but instead of a voice, all that came through was a sound like breathing, slow and steady, perfectly timed with his own panicked breaths. Then cutting through the static, he heard it, his own voice, tinny and distant. "This isn't real. This isn't happening." The words he'd spoken just moments ago played back to him through the radio. Jake's hands were shaking so badly he could barely keep the wheel steady. He looked at his GPS, desperate for the next exit, the next town, anything. But the screen was glitching, showing him on I-90, but also showing his truck icon duplicated, one slightly behind the other, both moving in perfect synchronization. The snow seemed to be getting heavier, or maybe his vision was blurring with fear. He couldn't tell anymore. Time felt strange, elastic. He'd look at his clock and it would say 11:47, then he'd look again and it still said 11:47, then suddenly it would jump to 11:52. In his mirror, the truck remained, constant as a shadow, matching every movement, every adjustment, every breath. Jake tried one more desperate measure. He reached down and turned off all his lights, headlights, running lights, everything. For a moment, he was plunging through the darkness blind, only the faint glow from his instrument panel giving any illumination. He counted to 10, then flipped them all back on. The truck behind him had also gone dark, and now its lights blazed back to life at the exact instant his did. That's when Jake saw something that made his blood freeze. In that brief moment of darkness, when both trucks had their lights off, he'd seen something else in his mirror. Behind the phantom truck, there was another one, and behind that one, another. A whole convoy of identical trucks, stretching back into the snowy darkness, all following each other at exactly 200 yards, all identical, all moving in perfect unison. He was being followed by himself, by versions of himself stretching back into infinity. The next thing Jake clearly remembered was sunlight. Harsh, bright, morning sunlight burning through his windshield. He was parked at a rest stop, slumped against his door, other truckers knocking on his window asking if he was all right. His engine was running, heat on full blast, and he was covered in cold sweat despite the warmth. "You okay, buddy?" a heavyset driver with a gray beard asked when Jake finally opened his door. "You've been sitting here for hours. We were about to call for help." Jake looked around wildly. It was morning, clear skies. The storm had passed. His GPS showed he was at the rest stop that had been 40 miles, but he had no memory of driving there, of parking, of stopping. The last thing he clearly recalled was seeing that infinite convoy of trucks in his mirror. "What time is it?" Jake asked, his voice hoarse. "Almost 8 in the morning. You've been here since at least 5, according to the guy who parks here regular. 5 a.m. But his last clear memory was around midnight. 5 hours gone. Jake checked his logs, his GPS history, everything. According to all his electronic records, he'd driven normally to this rest stop, pulled in at 4:47 a.m. and parked. Routine, normal, but he had no memory of any of it. He got out and walked around his truck on shaking legs, checking everything. It all looked normal. No damage, no stickers or marks that shouldn't be there. Just his truck exactly as it should be, except for one thing. On his passenger side mirror, the orange reflective strip he'd placed there was gone. In its place was a different marker, a blue reflective dot that he'd never seen before. And when he looked closer, he saw that the small dent in his front bumper, the one from Omaha 2 years ago, was on the opposite side from where he remembered it being. Jake finished his route to Minneapolis, delivered his load, and then took 2 weeks off. He told his dispatcher he had the flu. In reality, he spent those 2 weeks trying to convince himself it had been a hallucination, exhaustion, carbon monoxide poisoning, anything with a rational explanation. But he couldn't explain the missing hours, couldn't explain the changed markers on his truck, and he couldn't shake the feeling, deep in his gut, that somewhere out there on I-90 on snowy nights, his truck was still driving, still being followed by an infinite convoy of itself, stretching back through the storm into forever. He drives different routes now, never I-90, never in winter, and he's removed all his mirrors except the driver's side one because sometimes late at night when he's tired, he swears he can still see it in the reflection. That familiar shape, always 200 yards back, always following, always there. Story 2. The exit THATMOVED. Marcus Webb had the route memorized. 12 years hauling pharmaceuticals from Dallas to Chicago, same highway, same stops, same exits. He knew I-35 better than he knew his own apartment. Exit 267 was his usual fuel stop, a Love's truck stop with decent coffee, clean showers, and a subway that stayed open 24 hours. He stopped there at least 300 times. That's why he knew something was wrong when he couldn't. It was October 2020, around 2:30 in the morning. Marcus was making good time through Kansas clear skies, light traffic, his Kenworth T680 humming along at a steady 70. His fuel gauge showed a quarter tank, right on schedule for his planned stop. He just passed mile marker 265, which meant exit 267 should come up in less than 2 miles. He passed mile marker 266, then 267, then 268. No exit. Marcus frowned, checking his mirrors like maybe he'd somehow missed it, though he knew that was impossible. The exit had a massive Love sign visible from a mile away, lit up like a beacon. There was no way he could have passed it without noticing. His GPS showed exit 267 right where it should be, the little icon indicating the Love station, but the road ahead just kept stretching out, empty and dark. He slowed down, checking the mile markers again. They were counting up normally, 269, 270, 271. Must have closed it for construction, Marcus muttered, though that didn't make sense. There'd been no signs, no warnings, and his GPS wasn't showing any alerts. He pulled up his phone, checked the Love's app. It showed the exit 267 location as open, 24 hours, no issues reported. Fine. He'd just stop at the next exit. According to his GPS, that would be exit 283, another Love S about 15 miles ahead. He had plenty of fuel to make it. Marcus settled back in his seat, turned up his country music station, and kept driving. The highway was nearly empty, just the occasional car passing in the other direction. The Kansas plains stretched out on either side, flat and featureless in the darkness. He passed mile marker 280, then 281, then 282. Exit 283 didn't appear. The first tickle of unease started in Marcus's stomach. He leaned forward, peering through his windshield like he could make the exit appear through sheer willpower. His GPS still showed it ahead, less than half a mile now, but the highway just kept going, straight and empty. Mile marker 283 passed, then 284, then 285. No exit. What the hell? Marcus grabbed his CB radio. This is Red Line northbound on I-35. Anyone else out here noticing something weird with the exits? Static answered him. He tried again, switching channels. Nothing. Not even the usual chatter from other night drivers. Just empty. His fuel gauge was showing less than 1/8 of a tank now. Marcus felt his heartbeat pick up. The next exit, according to his outdated knowledge, was exit 297. but he wasn't sure he had enough fuel to make it, and besides, if 2 exits had somehow disappeared, who's to say the third one would be there? He passed a green sign. Next service is 52 miles. 52 miles. That couldn't be right. There were multiple exits between here and there, multiple truck stops, gas stations, rest areas. Marcus had driven this route hundreds of times. But the sign was official, looked legitimate, standard Kansas dot design. His phone rang, making him jump. The caller ID showed his wife, Sarah. He grabbed it, suddenly desperate to hear a familiar voice. "Sarah, baby, listen, something weird is." "Marcus." Her voice sounded strange, distant, with an odd echo. "Marcus, where are you?" "I'm on I-35, somewhere north of Emporia, but the exits are I-35. The echo got worse, her words overlapping themselves. "Marcus, you're not supposed to be on I-35. You took I-29 this run. You told me you took I-29. "No, baby, I always take I-35, you know that. Same route I always." The call cut off. He tried calling back, but his phone showed no signal. Then it showed full signal. Then no signal again, flickering back and forth. Marcus's hands were starting to sweat on the wheel. His fuel light came on, the orange glow accusatory in the darkness of his cab. He had maybe 30 miles of fuel left, probably less with the weight of his load. Mile marker 290, still no exit. The highway felt wrong now. Marcus couldn't put his finger on it at first, but gradually he realized what was bothering him. The road was too perfect. No potholes, no patches, no repair work, no tar snakes from sealed cracks. Just smooth, dark asphalt stretching endlessly ahead in his headlights. And the mile markers, now that he was paying attention, looked slightly off. The font was right, the design was right, but they looked too new, the reflective paint too bright and unmarked. A car passed him going the opposite direction, the first he'd seen in over 20 minutes. Marcus flashed his lights at it, a trucker's greeting, a request for acknowledgement, anything. The car didn't respond. As it passed, Marcus tried to see the driver, but the windows seemed tinted black or empty or both. Mile marker 300 appeared. According to the sign he'd passed earlier, there should be services here. But there was nothing. Just darkness and empty plains and the highway unspooling endlessly ahead. Marcus' gauge was bouncing on empty. He had to make a decision. He started slowing down, thinking maybe he'd pull over on the shoulder, call for help, even though the idea of stopping on this wrong version of I-35 made his skin crawl. That's when he saw it, a green exit sign appearing in his headlights. Exit 267 services. Marcus's blood went cold. Exit 267. The same exit he'd been looking for over an hour ago, back at mile marker 267. But he was at mile marker 301. The numbers didn't make sense, but the exit was there, clear as day, and his truck was running on fumes. He didn't have a choice. He took the exit. The ramp curved off to the right, and at the top, there it was. The Love's truck stop, lit up exactly as he remembered it, the familiar logo bright against the night sky. Marcus felt a wave of relief so intense he nearly cried. Whatever weirdness had been happening, he was back to reality, back to the normal world. He pulled into the fuel island, set his brake, and climbed down from the cab. His legs were shaky, adrenaline still coursing through his system. The truck stop looked exactly right, the same layout, the same signs, the same everything, except it was completely empty. No other trucks, no cars, no attendant in the booth. The lights were on, the open sign glowing, but there wasn't a soul in sight. Marcus looked at his watch, 3:47 a.m. Late, sure, but there should be someone here. There were always night drivers at Love stops. He tried the door to the convenience store. It opened. Inside, the lights were on, the coolers humming, fresh coffee brewing in the pots, but no one was there. No clerk, no customers, nobody. "Hello," Marcus called out. His voice echoed strangely in the empty store. "Anyone here?" He walked down an aisle, his boots loud on the tile floor. Everything was stocked normally, prices marked, nothing out of place, just empty. He grabbed a bottle of water from the cooler, left a $5 bill on the counter, and walked back outside. The fuel pumps were active. Marcus ran his fleet card and it authorized normally. He started filling his tank, watching the numbers climb on the pump display, trying to make sense of what was happening. That's when he noticed his truck. At first he thought it was the angle or the lights, but the more he looked, the more certain he became. His truck was facing the wrong direction. He'd pulled in facing north, he was sure of it. But now his Kenworth was pointing south, back toward the highway entrance ramp. Marcus dropped the fuel nozzle, diesel spilling onto the concrete. He backed away from his truck, heart hammering. He hadn't moved. He'd been in the store for maybe 5 minutes and his keys were in his pocket. His CB radio crackled to life, even though the truck's engine was off. "Exit 267, a voice said. It sounded like him, but wrong, like a recording played at the wrong speed. "Exit 267. Exit 267. Exit 267. Marcus ran. He didn't know where he was running to, but he sprinted away from his truck, away from the fuel pumps, toward the back of the truck stop. Behind the building, there was just darkness and empty field. He pulled out his phone, tried to call 911, but the screen showed something impossible. His GPS location flickering between dozens of different coordinates, all of them showing him at different exit 267 locations across multiple states. "This isn't real," Marcus whispered. "This isn't real." A sound made him turn. His truck was still at the fuel island, but now there were other trucks appearing around it. Identical Kenworth T680s, all the same color, all with the same fleet markings. They were materializing out of thin air, one by one, until the entire fuel island was packed with copies of his truck, and standing between them were copies of himself. Dozens of Marcus Webbs, all wearing the same clothes, all staring at him with the same expression of confused horror. The world tilted. Marcus fell to his knees, his vision blurring. The last thing he saw before everything went black was all the other versions of himself walking toward him, their mouths moving in unison, all saying the same thing. "Exit 267. You stopped at exit 267. He woke up in his truck, parked at a Love's truck stop, with a state trooper knocking on his window. Morning sunlight streamed through the windshield. His fuel tank was full. According to his logs and GPS, he'd stopped at exit 267 on I-35, fueled up at 3:15 a.m. and had been sleeping in his cab for 4 hours. "You all right, sir?" the trooper asked. "You were making some noise in there, sounded like you were having a nightmare." Marcus checked his watch, his phone, his GPS. Everything showed a normal stop, a normal night. But he remembered. He remembered the missing exits, the empty truck stop, the copies of himself. "Just a bad dream," Marcus told the trooper, but he knew it was, and he knew because of what he found later when he was back on the road. On his passenger seat, there was a receipt from the Love stop. He'd bought a bottle of water, paid with a $5 bill. The timestamp showed 3:47, but according to all his other logs, he'd never gone inside. He just fueled and slept. Marcus still drives I-35. He still stops at exit 267 because he has to, because it's his route. But every time he does, he counts the people in the truck stop carefully. He counts them, and he makes sure he recognizes them as real, separate individuals. Because sometimes, when it's very late and there aren't many people around, he sees them. Other drivers who move exactly like him, who choose the same snacks he would choose, who walk with his gait and scratch their heads the way he does. And sometimes, just sometimes, when he's fueling up in the middle of the night, he looks across the fuel island and sees his own truck parked there, even though he's standing right next to it. And behind the wheel, he can see himself, staring back with the same horrified recognition. Exit 267 is still there on all the maps, still there on the highway, still serving travelers 24 hours a day. But Marcus knows the truth. Exit 267 never left. He did. And he's never been quite sure if he ever really came back. Story 3. the frozen hitchhiker. The snow had been falling for 3 hours when Dennis Kowalski saw the woman standing by the side of Highway 2 in northern Montana. It was January 2018, 10 degrees below zero, and the wind was howling across the plains hard enough to rock his Peterbilt even with 40,000 pounds of lumber weighing it down. Visibility was maybe 100 feet, the world reduced to a tunnel of white in his headlights. Dennis had been driving trucks for 23 years, and his first rule was simple: never pick up hitchhikers. Too many stories, too many risks, too much liability. But this was different. This was someone in genuine danger. The nearest town was 30 miles back, and there was nothing ahead for at least 50 miles. In this weather, at this temperature, you die of exposure in less than an hour. The woman was young, maybe early 20s, wearing a light blue jacket that was completely inadequate for the conditions. She wasn't jumping around or waving frantically like you'd expect from someone freezing to death. She was just standing there, perfectly still, one arm slightly raised like she was calmly hailing a taxi in downtown Chicago. Dennis swore under his breath and started slowing down. He'd call the authorities as soon as he got a signal, get her to the next town, make sure she was safe. It was the right thing to do, the only thing to do. He brought his rig to a stop about 20 feet past her and watched in his mirror as she walked toward his cab. Not hurried, not running, just normal pace through snow that was ankle deep. She reached his passenger door and looked up at him. That's when Dennis felt the first prickle of wrongness. Her face was pale, very pale, but she wasn't shivering, wasn't hugging herself against the cold. Her hair was dark and hung loose around her shoulders, and there wasn't a single snowflake clinging to it despite the storm raging around her. Dennis hesitated, his hand on the lock button. Something in his gut was screaming at him not to open that door. But she was out there in 10 below zero, and whatever was wrong with this situation, letting her freeze to death wasn't an option. He unlocked the door and pushed it open. "Get in, quickly. You trying to die out there?" She climbed up into the cab with surprising grace, pulling the door shut behind her. The interior light gave Dennis a better look at her. She was pretty, with dark eyes and delicate features. Her jacket was actually even lighter than he'd thought, just a thin windbreaker. No gloves, no hat. She should have been dead already. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was soft, almost melodic. "I've been waiting for quite some time." Dennis turned up the heat and put the truck back in gear, easing onto the highway. "What the hell were you doing out here? Car break down. Where's your vehicle?" "I don't remember," she said, staring straight ahead through the windshield. "I've been standing there for a long time. You're the first one to stop." "How long? When did your car break down?" She turned to look at him, and Dennis felt ice run down his spine that had nothing to do with the temperature outside. Her eyes were completely calm, no fear, no relief, no emotion at all, just placid emptiness. "I don't remember," she repeated. "What year is it?" Dennis laughed, a nervous sound. "It's 2018, January. You hit your head or something. You might have hypothermia. That can mess with your memory. We'll get you to a hospital and have her get you checked out." 2018, she said softly, like she was tasting the words. "That's been quite a long time then." "Since when?" "Since I've been waiting." Dennis didn't like this conversation. He grabbed his CB radio, tried to raise anyone on the channels. Static. Storm was probably interfering with signals. His cell phone showed no service, which wasn't surprising out here in the middle of nowhere. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to keep things normal, trying to ignore the way the temperature in his cab seemed to be dropping despite the heater running full blast. "Catherine," she said. "Catherine Mills." "I'm Dennis. Just sit tight, Catherine. We'll get you warmed up into safety. You got family I can call when we get a signal." "No," she said. "They're all gone now. Dead for a long time." Dennis shot her a look. She was still staring straight ahead, her hands folded in her lap. Looking closer, he noticed her clothes weren't just light, they were old-fashioned. The style of her jacket, her jeans, even her shoes. They looked like something from the 70s or 80s. "You from around here originally?" Dennis asked, not sure why he was prolonging this conversation when every instinct was telling him something was deeply wrong. "I grew up in Shelby," she said. Do you know it? Sure, passed through it a few hours back. That where you were headed? I was leaving, Catherine said. Driving to Seattle, I'd gotten a job there, secretary position at a law firm. I was so excited. 22 years old, my whole life ahead of me. Was past tense. Dennis's hands tightened on the wheel. That's great, he said carefully. So what happened? Why were you standing out there? My car broke down, Catherine said, still in that eerily calm voice. It was snowing just like this. I pulled over to the side of the road and tried to flag down help, but no one would stop. Car after car, truck after truck, they all just passed right by me. I waved and waved, but no one stopped. When was this, Catherine? January 15th, 1977. The cab went completely silent except for the howl of wind and the rumble of the engine. Dennis felt sweat breaking out on his forehead despite the cold he was feeling in his bones. That's not possible, he said quietly. Catherine turned to look at him again. I got so cold, she said. Colder than I'd ever been in my life. I couldn't feel my fingers or my toes. My car wouldn't start and no one would stop. I tried walking, but the snow was so deep and the wind was so strong. I couldn't see anything, so I went back to the side of the road and I kept trying to wave down help. Catherine, I don't remember when I stopped feeling cold, she continued, as if he hadn't spoken. But at some point it didn't hurt anymore. I just felt tired, so tired. And then I wasn't tired either. I was just there, standing, waiting for someone to stop. Dennis looked at her, really looked at her. Her skin wasn't just pale, it was bloodless, gray. And now that his eyes had adjusted to the cab's interior lighting, he could see something else. He could see the seat through her. Just slightly, just at the edges, like she wasn't entirely solid. You're not real, Dennis whispered. I don't know if I am or not, Catherine said. I only know I've been waiting by that road for someone to stop. And you stopped. You finally stopped. The temperature in the cab was plummeting. Dennis could see his breath now, could feel frost forming on the inside of his windshield despite the heater blasting. His fingers were starting to go numb on the steering wheel. What do you want? He asked, his voice shaking. I don't want anything, Catherine said sadly. I'm just so glad he stopped. Do you know what it's like waiting and waiting while everyone passes by? Watching people see you and choose to keep driving, year after year after year. I need you to get out of my truck, Dennis said, trying to keep his voice steady. I'm sorry for what happened to you, but you need to get out. We're going 60 miles an hour in a blizzard, Catherine pointed out. I'd be killed. You're already dead, Catherine smiled for the first time, and it was the saddest thing Dennis had ever seen. Yes, she said. I suppose I am. I died on January 15, 1977 of exposure. They found my body 3 days later when the storm cleared. I was 22 years old. I'd been less than a mile from my car trying to walk to find help. Dennis's teeth were chattering now. The cab was so cold he could barely move his fingers. Ice was forming on the dashboard, on the controls, spreading like crystalline fingers across every surface. But I never left the roadside, Catherine continued. Part of me stayed there waiting, hoping that someone would stop, that someone would care enough to help. And you did, Dennis, you stopped. What happens now? Dennis managed to ask through numb lips. Now, Catherine looked at him with those empty, ancient eyes. Now I remember what it was like being cold, being abandoned, being forgotten. And now I'm not alone in that memory anymore. The truck was slowing down even though Dennis's foot was still on the accelerator. Ice was spreading up his arms, his legs, covering him in frost. He tried to reach for the door handle, but his hand wouldn't move. Through the windshield, barely visible through the snow, he could see a green glow in the distance. Highway exit sign. That's where they found me, Catherine said, pointing at the glow. Mile marker 234. My car was just past that exit. They towed it away 40 years ago, but I never knew that. I just kept waiting by the wrong spot, confused about why no one would stop. Dennis wanted to scream, but his jaw was frozen shut. The truck came to a complete stop right there in the middle of Highway 2. The engine died. The lights went out. Everything was silent except for the wind and Catherine's soft voice. Thank you for stopping, Dennis. Thank you for not leaving me alone out there. Now you'll wait with me. Just for a little while, just until someone else stops. Dennis felt himself moving, though his muscles weren't responding to his commands. The door opened and the blizzard wind hit him like a physical blow. He climbed down from the cab, his movements jerky and wrong, and found himself standing by the side of the road. Catherine stood next to him, solid now, visible, wearing her light blue jacket and looking exactly like she had 41 years ago. "It won't be long," she said gently. "Someone always stops eventually, and when they do, you can rest. You can move on. You just have to wait here just like I did until someone takes your place." Dennis tried to speak, to cry out, but no sound came. He was so cold, colder than he'd ever been in his life. And he was standing by the side of Highway 2, one arm slightly raised, waiting for someone to stop. Behind him, his Peterbilt sat empty and dark, quickly being buried by the falling snow. They found Dennis Kowalski's truck 3 days later when the storm cleared, abandoned in the middle of Highway 2 at mile marker 234. The engine was cold, the cab empty, his personal effects still inside. There were no footprints in the snow around the truck, no indication of where Dennis had gone or why he'd stopped in the middle of the highway. Search and rescue combed the area for weeks. They never found a body. They never found any trace of Dennis at all. But local truckers started reporting something strange. On snowy nights, when visibility is bad and the temperature drops below zero, they see him. A figure standing by the side of Highway 2, near mile marker 234, one arm raised like he's hailing a ride. Most of them don't stop. They've heard the stories now about the frozen hitchhiker who disappeared, about the young woman from 1977 who was never found. Most don't stop, but every few years someone does. Someone with a kind heart who can't bear to leave a stranded traveler out in the cold. And when they stop, they find an empty roadside and a truck that won't start again. And the cycle continues, each Good Samaritan joining the eternal wait by the frozen highway. The current count, according to local legend, is 7. 7 drivers waiting by mile marker 234, taking turns appearing to passing travelers, waiting for someone kind enough to stop, someone compassionate enough to help. Waiting to pass on the curse of being remembered just once before fading away forever. Story 4. The Nowhere Diner. Frank Sullivan had been driving for 16 hours straight, which was stupid and illegal, and exactly the kind of thing that led to accidents. But his dispatcher had promised a bonus if he got the automotive parts to Memphis by 6 a.m., and Frank had a daughter starting college in the fall who needed tuition money. So he kept driving through Missouri on Route 63, windows down to keep the cool October air on his face, CB radio playing classic rock, and a thermos of coffee that had gone cold hours ago keeping him company. It was 3:30 in the morning when he saw the diner. The sign appeared first, one of the fashion neon numbers that you don't see much anymore. Millie's Diner, good food, better coffee. The pink and blue neon flickered invitingly against the darkness. Frank's stomach, which he'd been ignoring for the past 3 hours, suddenly made its needs known with an audible growl. He couldn't remember seeing this diner on any of his previous runs down this route, but that didn't mean much. There were lots of small-town diners scattered across rural Missouri, and it wasn't like he had them all memorized. Besides, he was getting too tired to drive safely. 20 minutes for a meal and some real coffee would do him good. Frank took the next turn off, following a small access road that curved back toward where he'd seen the neon sign. The diner appeared after about a quarter mile, a classic 1950s-style chrome affair, complete with big windows, red vinyl booths visible inside, and that beautiful neon sign casting colorful shadows across an otherwise empty parking lot. Except for one car, a pale blue Chevrolet Bel Air, late 50s model if Frank was any judge, parked right in front. Beautifully maintained, the chrome gleaming even under the parking lot lights. Frank pulled his Freightliner into the lot, set his air brakes, and grabbed his wallet. The diner looked warm and welcoming, every window glowing with yellow light. He could see someone moving around inside, a waitress in a pink uniform. A bell chimed when he pushed through the door, and Frank was hit with a wave of nostalgia so strong it almost made him stagger. Everything was period perfect. Black and white checkered floor, chrome-edged tables, a long counter with round red stools, a jukebox in the corner playing something by the Everly Brothers. Even the smell was right, that mixture of coffee and bacon grease and pie that every good diner should have. "Sit anywhere, hun," called the waitress, a woman in her 40s with her hair in a style that went out of fashion before Frank was born. She had a bright smile and a coffee pot in her hand. "I'll be right with you." Frank slid into a booth near the window where he could keep an eye on his truck. The vinyl seat squeaked under him, and the table was clean enough that he could see his reflection in the chrome napkin dispenser. A menu was tucked between the salt and pepper shakers, the plastic covering yellowed with age. The waitress appeared with a cup and saucer, filling it with coffee that was actually steaming and smelled like heaven. "You look like you've been driving all night," she said kindly. "Pretty much," Frank admitted. "Long haul from Chicago to Memphis." "Well, you're in luck. Kitchen's still open. 24 hours, been serving travelers since 1958. She said it with pride like it was something special. "I'm Millie. This is my place." "Frank Sullivan. Pleasure to meet you, Millie." He picked up the menu, scanning the options. Standard diner fare, burgers, meatloaf, breakfast served all day. The prices made him do a double take. $2.50 for a burger. "That a typo," Millie laughed. "That's our price, and you'll get a good meal for it too. Nothing fancy, just good honest food. What'll you have?" Frank ordered a cheeseburger, fries, and another cup of coffee. Millie wrote it down on a little pad with a golf pencil, called the order back to the kitchen through a window, and disappeared to attend to the diner's only other customer. A man in his 30s wearing a fedora and a suit that looked straight out of Mad Men, sitting at the counter reading a newspaper. Frank sipped his coffee and looked around the diner more carefully. The attention to detail was incredible. The jukebox was a Wurlitzer, the real deal. The ads on the walls were vintage. Coca-Cola, Burma Shave, see the USA in your Chevrolet. The coffee cup he was drinking from was heavy ceramic with Millie's Diner written in script on the side. Some people were really dedicated to the retro aesthetic. Frank had to admire the commitment. His burger arrived after about 10 minutes, and it was possibly the best burger he'd ever had. The meat was hand-formed, charred perfectly on the outside and juicy inside. The cheese was real American that had melted just right, and the bun was soft and fresh. The fries were hand-cut, crispy, salted perfectly. "This is incredible," Frank said when Millie came by to refill his coffee. "You don't find food like this anymore." "Recipe hasn't changed since we opened," Millie said with obvious satisfaction. "Some things don't need improving. How far you got left to go?" "About 4 more hours if I don't hit traffic." "Long night ahead of you. You want some pie before you go. Made a fresh apple this evening." Frank's common sense said he should get back on the road. His stomach said pie sounded amazing. His stomach won. While he waited for the pie, Frank pulled out his phone to check his route, make sure he was still on schedule. The screen showed no signal, which wasn't surprising this far out in rural Missouri. But when he looked at the time, he frowned. 3:45 a.m. That couldn't be right. He'd been in the diner for at least 20 minutes, probably closer to 30. He checked his watch. It also said 3:45. That was strange, but not impossible. His watch could be broken, and his phone probably pulled the time from a cell tower. Maybe it had stopped updating when he lost. Millie brought the pie, and Frank forgot about the time discrepancy. The pie was warm, the apples soft and cinnamon sweet, the crust flaky and buttery. It was perfect. Everything in this diner was perfect, which should have been his first clue that something was wrong. "Can I ask you something?" Frank said when Millie came by with the check. $2.50 for a burger, $1.50 for pie. These prices are crazy low. How do you stay in business? Millie smiled that bright, warm smile. "We get by. Been here since 1958 and will be here for a good long while yet. That'll be $6.25 total. Frank left a 10, told her to keep the change. You saved my life tonight, Millie. I was about to fall asleep at the wheel. That's what we're here for, hun. You drive safe now. Come back and see us sometime. Frank walked out into the cool October air, feeling better than he had in hours. Fed, caffeinated, and ready to finish his run. He climbed into his truck, started the engine, and checked his GPS. That's when things got weird. His GPS showed his current location, but something was off. The diner wasn't on the map. The access road he'd taken to get here wasn't on the map. According to his GPS, he was sitting in the middle of an empty field, nothing around him for miles except Route 63 about a quarter mile away. Frank looked at the diner through his windshield. It was definitely there, solid and real and glowing with warm light. He could see Millie inside, talking to the man at the counter. He could see the Chevrolet Bel Air parked in front of his truck, but his GPS insisted none of it existed. A cold feeling started in Frank's stomach. He put his truck in gear and pulled out of the parking lot, heading back down the access road toward Route 63. In his side mirror, he watched the diner recede behind him, that neon sign getting smaller and smaller. When he reached Route 63 and pulled back onto the highway, he looked at the clock on his dashboard. 3:47 a.m. Frank had been at that diner for close to an hour. He'd eaten a meal, had multiple cups of coffee, had a conversation with Millie. But according to every clock he had, only 2 minutes had passed since he'd seen that neon sign and decided to stop. His hands were shaking on the wheel. He grabbed his CB radio. This is Sullivan eastbound on Route 63. Anyone familiar with a diner called Millie's around here? Just stopped there looking for some info. After a moment, a gravelly voice responded. Son, there ain't no Millie's diner on Route 63. You feeling all right? I'm looking right at it in my mirror, Frank said, glancing back, but the diner was gone. On an access road, there was just dark roadside, trees and brush. No turn off. No neon sign. Nothing. I don't know what you think you saw, the voice on the CB said, but there's nothing out here but road and trees. You sure you're awake? Frank didn't answer. He pulled over onto the shoulder, threw his truck in park and got out, walked back down the highway to where he'd seen the turn off. There was nothing, just an unbroken line of trees and a ditch. No sign of a road, no tire tracks, no indication that anyone had driven through here in years. But in his pocket, Frank could feel the receipt from Millie's diner. With shaking hands, he pulled it out. It was real paper, slightly yellowed, with Millie's diner printed across the top in cheerful script. The handwriting listed his order. 1 cheeseburger, $2.50, $1 fries, $1.75, $1 apple pie, $1.50, coffee 50 cents. Total, $6.25. At the bottom, in different handwriting, a note. Thanks for stopping by. Drive safe. Millie. Frank stood there on the side of Route 63 as the sky began to lighten with the first hint of dawn. He stood there holding a receipt from a diner that didn't exist, having eaten a meal that took an hour but only lasted 2 minutes, having met a woman who couldn't possibly be real. He got back in his truck and finished his run to Memphis, made his deadline with time to spare, collected his bonus, told everyone he'd made great time and hadn't even needed to stop. But he kept that receipt, and over the next few months he did some research, hit libraries, looked through old newspapers on microfiche, dug through historical records. He found it eventually. Millie's diner had been real. It had opened in 1958 on Route 63 in rural Missouri, run by a woman named Millie Patterson. By all accounts, it had been a popular stop for travelers, known for good food and great coffee. The diner had operated successfully for almost 10 years. On October 15, 1967, at approximately 3:45 a.m., a drunk driver had crossed the center line on Route 63, left the road, and plowed into Millie's diner at high speed. The building had caught fire. 3 people died. Millie Patterson, a waitress named Sarah Collins, and a traveling salesman named Robert Hayes who'd been eating at the counter. They were never able to rebuild. The diner was demolished, and eventually the access road was closed off and nature reclaimed it. For most people, Millie's Diner became just a memory, then in local history, then forgotten entirely. But apparently not by everyone. Frank never took Route 63 through Missouri again. Started using I-55 instead, even though it added an hour to his run time. But other drivers reported seeing it, according to posts he found on trucking forums. Always around 3:30 or 3:45 a.m. Always when they were tired, hungry, in need of a break. Always serving the best food they'd ever had at 1960s prices, with service that was warm and kind and felt like coming home. No one who stopped there ever regretted it, according to the posts. The food was always worth it. The coffee always helped. And Millie was always friendly, always welcoming, always making sure her customers were taken care of before they got back on the road. Frank still has that receipt, kept in a plastic sleeve in his wallet. Sometimes, late at night when he's tired and hungry and still has hours to drive, he thinks about stopping there again. About that perfect burger, that fresh pie, that excellent coffee. About Millie's warm smile and kind words. But he never takes Route 63 through Missouri anymore, because he's afraid that if he stops at Millie's Diner a second time, he might not leave. He might join the man in the fedora at the counter, forever reading a newspaper from 1967, forever stuck in that moment just before the drunk driver's headlights came crashing through the windows. Some diners serve more than food, Frank learned. Some serve as way stations for lost souls, places caught in time, replaying the same perfect night over and over before disaster struck. And Millie's Diner, it's still there, somewhere in between the real world and whatever comes after. Still open 24 hours. Still serving the best food you'll ever taste. Still waiting for tired travelers who need a break, who need a good meal, who need kindness. Just don't expect to find it on any map. And if you do stop there, make sure you leave before 3:45 a.m. becomes 3:46, before the present catches up to the past, before you become part of the tragedy that happened one cold October morning in 1967. Or don't leave at all. Millie will take care of you either way. She's been doing it since 1958 and she'll keep doing it forever, serving meals to the living and the dead, making no distinction between them. Because in Millie's Diner, everyone is welcome, everyone is home, and time has no meaning beyond the tick of the clock that's been stopped at 3:45 for over years. Story 5. The Breathing Cargo. Tommy Garrett accepted the job because the money was exceptional. $5,000 to haul a single container from a private warehouse in northern Maine to a research facility outside of Burlington, Vermont. The dispatcher had been vague about the contents, just said it was sensitive biological materials that needed climate control and careful handling. Tommy had been driving refrigerated trailers for 8 years. He knew how to handle sensitive cargo. What he didn't know was that sometimes cargo shouldn't be handled at all. He picked up the container at 9 p.m. on a Thursday in November 2021. The warehouse was one of those unmarked industrial buildings you find in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by pine forest and darkness. A man in a lab coat met him at the loading dock, clipboard in hand, looking nervous and exhausted. "You're the driver?" the man asked, checking his watch for the third time in as many minutes. "Tommy Garrett. I'm here to pick up a container for Burlington." "Yes. Right. Okay." The man looked back at the warehouse like he was expecting something to come bursting out. "Listen carefully. The container is set to maintain exactly 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Do not, under any circumstances, adjust the temperature. If your refrigeration unit fails, you call this number immediately." He handed Tommy a card with a phone number handwritten on it. "Don't call your dispatcher, don't call roadside assistance. You call this number. Understood?" "Yeah, sure. What's in the container?" "That's not your concern," the man said, but there was no authority in his voice, just fear. "Just maintain the temperature and get it to Burlington by 6 a.m. Don't stop unless you absolutely have to. Don't open the container. Don't even think about looking inside." "Biological materials," my dispatcher said. "What kind exactly?" The man in the lab coat leaned closer, and Tommy could smell coffee and sweat and something chemical on his breath. "The kind that the temperature matters a great deal. 38 degrees. Not 39, not 37, exactly 38. The container has internal monitoring. If the temperature varies by more than 1 degree in either direction for more than 10 minutes, you'll get a warning light. If that happens, you stop and you call that number. Immediately." They loaded the container onto Tommy's trailer. It was smaller than he expected, maybe 8 feet by 8 feet, made of stainless steel with serious insulation. The refrigeration unit they hooked up to it was industrial grade, way more powerful than necessary for a container that size. Tommy did his pre-trip inspection, temperature gauge, confirmed it was holding steady at 38 degrees, and pulled out of the warehouse. The first hour was uneventful. He took Route 2 west, following his GPS through the darkness of rural Maine. The roads were empty this time of night, just the occasional car passing in the opposite direction. Tommy's refrigeration unit hummed steadily behind him, the temperature gauge glowing a reassuring 38 degrees in his mirror. Then he heard the sound. At first, he thought it was the refrigeration unit, some mechanical quirk he hadn't noticed before. But the more he listened, the more certain he became that the sound wasn't mechanical. It was organic, a slow, rhythmic sound like something breathing. Deep inhalations, long exhalations, steady as a heartbeat. Tommy turned down his radio, listening carefully. There it was again, unmistakable now. Something in the container was breathing. "Biological materials," Tommy muttered. They could have been more specific. He tried to ignore it, focused on driving, but the sound kept pulling at his attention. It was too regular to be air escaping from somewhere, too deliberate. And it seemed to be getting louder, or maybe he was just becoming more aware of it now that he knew what to listen for. Around midnight, about 3 hours into the drive, the breathing pattern changed. Instead of slow and steady, it became faster, more agitated. And then Tommy heard something else, a scratching sound like fingernails dragging against metal from inside the container. Tommy's hands tightened on the wheel. He grabbed his CB radio. "Anyone out there hauling weird cargo that makes noise? This is Garrett westbound on Route 2. Static." Then a voice crackled through. "What kind of noise we talking about?" "Like breathing." "Scratching." A long pause. "You hauling livestock?" "No, temperature-controlled container, supposed to be biological materials." "Biological materials don't breathe, friend." "Yeah," Tommy said quietly. "That's what I'm worried about." He checked his mirror. The temperature gauge still showed exactly 38 degrees. Everything was functioning normally. But the scratching was getting more insistent, and now there was another sound joining it. A low moaning, muffled by the insulated walls, but definitely there. Tommy pulled out the card the lab coat man had given him and dialed the number on his cell phone. It rang 4 times before someone picked up. "Is there a temperature issue?" A woman's voice asked immediately, no greeting. "No, temperature's fine, but there's something alive in this container. It's breathing and scratching and making sounds. Nobody told me I'd be transporting something alive." "The noises are normal," the woman, though her voice was tense. "Just maintain the temperature and continue to Burlington. Do not stop. Do not open the container." "What the hell am I carrying?" "That's classified information. Just do your job, Mr. Garrett." "Lady, if there's something alive in there, there are regulations about transporting living things. Permits, specific conditions. This takes priority over standard regulations. You're being paid well above standard rates specifically because this shipment requires discretion and professionalism. The noises are harmless. Just maintain temperature and continue your route." She hung up. Tommy sat there for a moment, phone in hand, listening to the sounds from his cargo. The breathing, the scratching, the moaning. It sounded almost human but wrong somehow. The rhythm was off, the pitch was strange. He thought about refusing the shipment, calling his own dispatcher, pulling over and walking away from the whole thing. But $5,000, and he'd signed a contract. And technically, the cargo wasn't violating any conditions he'd been given. The temperature was stable. Nothing had said the cargo wouldn't make noise. Tommy kept driving. The next hour got worse. The sounds from the container intensified. The breathing became ragged, desperate. The scratching became pounding, hard enough that Tommy could feel it through his seat, rhythmic impacts against the container walls. And the moaning became something closer to words, though Tommy couldn't make out what was being said. Didn't want to make it out. Around 2 a.m., Tommy crossed into New Hampshire. The roads were empty, no other traffic, just darkness and pine trees and the sounds coming from behind him. He kept checking the temperature gauge obsessively. Still 38 degrees, still functioning perfectly. Then the pounding stopped. The sudden silence was somehow worse than the noise had been. Tommy's heart was racing. He leaned forward, trying to hear anything from the container. For several minutes, there was nothing. Just the hum of the refrigeration unit and the rumble of his truck's engine. Then he heard it, a voice, clear and distinct, coming from the container. "Let me out." Tommy's blood went cold. It was a human voice. Male, adult, desperate. "Please, please let me out. It's so cold in here. I can't feel my hands, please." "Jesus," Tommy whispered. His hands were shaking on the wheel. There was a person in that container. Someone alive, trapped, freezing in 38-degree temperature. "Please, I don't know where I am. I don't know how I got here. Just let me out. Just open the door." Tommy grabbed his phone, called the number again. It went straight to voicemail. He tried 2 more times, no answer. The voice from the container was crying now. "Please, it's so cold. Anything, please help me. My name is David Morrison. I have a family. I have 2 kids. Please, just let me out." Tommy's mind was racing. If there was really a person back there, he couldn't leave them in a 38-degree container. That would be murder. But the lab coat man had been so insistent about not opening it, about maintaining temperature, about not stopping. What if it was some kind of test? What if they were monitoring him somehow, seeing if he'd follow instructions? But what if there really was a person dying in that container? "David," Tommy shouted toward the back of his cab. "David, I'm going to pull over. Hold on." "Thank you," the voice sobbed. Thank you, please hurry. I can't feel my legs anymore, please." Tommy started looking for a place to pull over safely. The road here was narrow, trees close on both sides. He needed a wide shoulder or a parking area. That's when the temperature alarm went off. A red light started flashing on his control panel, accompanied by a harsh beeping. Tommy looked at the gauge in his mirror. The temperature in the container was rising. 39 degrees, 40 degrees. 41. No, Tommy muttered, checking his refrigeration unit controls. Everything showed green. The unit was working fine, pushing cold air, but the temperature kept climbing. 42 degrees, 43. The voice from the container changed. The crying stopped. Instead, it laughed, a sound that made every hair on Tommy's body stand up. "Oh, it's getting warmer," the voice said, but it didn't sound human anymore. It sounded like multiple voices speaking in unison, harmonizing in a way that human vocal cords couldn't manage. "Finally, do you know how long I've been cold? How many years frozen, sleeping, waiting?" Tommy grabbed his phone with shaking hands and called the number again. This time it was answered on the first ring. "What's the temperature?" the woman demanded. "It's rising. It's at 44 now. The alarm is going off, but the unit is working fine." "Where are you?" "Route 2, maybe 20 miles into New Hampshire." "Listen to me very carefully," the woman said, her voice urgent and terrified. "Do not stop. Do not open that container. Get the temperature back down to 38 degrees immediately. There should be an emergency override switch on your refrigeration control panel, red button. Flip the cover and hold it down for 5 seconds." Tommy found the button, flipped the cover, held it down. The refrigeration unit's hum increased to a roar as it kicked into overdrive. The temperature gauge stopped climbing at 46 degrees. It's holding at 46, Tommy said. Not going down. It needs to go down. It needs to 38. How far are you from Burlington? 2.5 hours at least. You need to get here faster. Every minute above 40 degrees, it becomes more active. If the temperature reaches 50 degrees, the container won't hold it. Hold what? What the fuck is in my truck? Something that should have stayed frozen. Something that we thought we could study. We were wrong. Just get here fast. She hung up again. The voices from the container were singing now, a melody that hurt Tommy's ears, that made his vision blur. The temperature was at 47 degrees and climbing slowly despite the refrigeration unit running at maximum. Let me out, the voices sang. Let me see the world again. Let me taste the air. Let me touch the living. It's been so cold, so dark, so lonely. Let me out, Tommy. Let me drive with you. Let me wear your skin. Tommy was crying now, tears running down his face as he pushed his truck as fast as he dared on the dark roads. The speedometer climbed to 70, then 80. Way too fast for these conditions, but speed was the only thing that mattered now. The temperature hit 48 degrees. The container started making a sound like metal groaning under stress. Something inside was pushing against the walls, testing them, looking for weaknesses. Tommy's phone rang. The woman. We're sending a containment team to meet you. Where are you now? Just crossed into Vermont, maybe an hour and a half out. You need to get here in an hour or less. The container is designed to hold up to 50 degrees. Above that, the seals will fail. What happens if the seals fail? Silence. Then, nothing good, just drive faster. The temperature hit 49 degrees. The groaning from the container became a shriek of bending metal. Whatever was inside was strong, impossibly strong, and getting stronger as it warmed up. Almost there, Tommy, the voices sang. Almost warm enough, almost free. And when I get out, we're going to have such fun together. I'm going to show you things that have been hidden since your species learned to make fire. I'm going to teach you songs that will make your brain bleed. I'm going to. The container's wall buckled. Tommy could see it in his mirror, a distortion in the metal, something pushing from the inside hard enough to warp stainless steel. He was doing 90 now, his truck shaking with the speed, barely controlling it on the curves. Other vehicles honked and swerved out of his way. He ignored them all, focused entirely on the road ahead and the temperature gauge that now read 49.5 degrees. The GPS showed 40 minutes to Burlington. The temperature was rising a degree every 10 minutes. He wasn't going to make it. Come on, Tommy chanted, gripping the wheel so hard his hands were white. The refrigeration unit was making grinding sounds now, pushed beyond its design limits, but it was slowing the temperature rise. 49.6 degrees, 49.7. Ahead, he saw flashing lights. A roadblock, multiple vehicles with hazard lights, people in hazmat suits. The containment team. Tommy slammed on his brakes, bringing his rig to a shuddering stop 50 feet from the roadblock. The temperature gauge read 49.9 degrees. People in hazmat suits swarmed his truck. Someone yanked open his door. Out, now, run. Tommy didn't need to be told twice. He jumped from the cab and ran, his legs shaking so badly he almost fell. Behind him, he heard the shriek of metal tearing. Heard something that might have been laughter or might have been screaming. Heard voices speaking in languages that predated human civilization. Someone tackled him, pulled him behind a heavy vehicle. There was a sound like a thunderclap, and a wave of cold washed over everything, cold so intense it hurt, cold that formed frost on every surface. When Tommy looked up, the container was covered in ice, frozen solid. The temperature around it dropped to what had to be well below zero. Liquid nitrogen, someone explained later. They'd flooded the container with liquid nitrogen, bringing the temperature down so fast that whatever was inside had no time to escape. Tommy never found out exactly what he'd been transporting. The people in hazmat suits wouldn't tell him anything except that the situation was contained, and that he'd done exceptionally well under difficult circumstances. They paid him the $5,000 plus a bonus of another $5,000, had him sign a stack of non-disclosure agreements and sent him on his way. He doesn't haul refrigerated cargo anymore. Switched to dry goods, stuff that can't possibly be alive, that can't possibly wake up and start talking to him from the back of his trailer. But sometimes, late at night when he's trying to sleep, Tommy hears it, that breathing sound, slow and steady. And sometimes he hears the voice, singing songs in languages no human should know, promising him that they'll meet again someday, that whatever was in that container is still waiting, still patient, still cold but dreaming of warmth. And sometimes, on the coldest winter nights, Tommy wakes up shivering even though his apartment's heat is on full blast, and he knows, deep in his bones, that somewhere in a research facility in Vermont, something is waiting in its frozen cage, counting the days someone makes a mistake, until the temperature rises 1 degree too far, until it can finally finish the conversation it started with him on that dark November drive, waiting to teach the world those songs, waiting to taste the air again, waiting to be warm. Story 6. The Radio Conversation. Anita Rodriguez had been driving solo for 3 years, one of the few women running long-haul routes in the Southwest. She earned her reputation for reliability and toughness, hauling everything from construction equipment to produce across Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. She dealt with blowouts, breakdowns, aggressive drivers, and more than a few men who thought a woman had no business behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler. None of it had prepared her for the night she picked up a CB conversation that shouldn't have existed. It was August 2019, and Anita was hauling a load of furniture from Phoenix to Albuquerque on I-40. The sun had set hours ago, leaving her with just the endless darkness of the New Mexico desert, broken occasionally by distant lights from ranch houses or the glow of small towns miles off the highway. She had her CB on, tuned to channel 19 like always, listening to the occasional chatter from other night drivers. Around 11 p.m., the radio traffic was light. A couple of truckers discussing a speed trap near Gallup. Someone asking about truck stop food recommendations. The usual stuff. Then a new voice came through, a man with a smooth, almost hypnotic cadence. "Westbound driver, you reading me?" Anita picked up her handset. "This is westbound on I-40, eastbound heading to Albuquerque. Go ahead." "Ah, my mistake. Looking for a westbound driver. Safe travels to you." "Copy that. Safe travels." The radio went quiet for a while, and Anita settled back into her seat, watching mile markers pass in her headlights. She was making good time, should be in Albuquerque well before her delivery window. 20 minutes later, the smooth voice came back. "Westbound driver near mile marker 89, you reading me?" Anita glanced at her GPS. She was approaching mile marker 89. Odd coincidence, but not impossible. Lots of drivers called out mile markers to identify their location. She didn't respond, just listened. "Westbound driver, I know you can hear me. We need to talk." The words sent a prickle down Anita's spine. Something about the tone, the certainty, felt wrong. She checked her mirrors. The highway behind her was empty except for a pair of headlights maybe a quarter mile back. In front of her, darkness and road. Against her better judgment, she picked up the handset. "This is eastbound near mile marker 89. You looking for someone specific?" "Yes," the voice said. "I'm looking for you, Anita." She dropped the handset like it had burned her. Her heart started hammering. The voice had used her name. How did they know her name? The CB crackled again. "Please don't be afraid. I need to warn you about something. Something important. Will you listen?" Anita grabbed the handset with shaking hands. "Who the hell are you? How do you know my name?" "My name isn't important. What's important is that you listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. In approximately 6 miles, you're going to see an exit. Exit 96. There will be a rest area sign. Do not take that exit." "Why not?" "Because if you take that exit, you won't leave it, not alive." Anita's mouth went dry. "Is this some kind of threat? Because I'm recording this conversation and I'll send it straight to the—" "It's not a threat," the voice interrupted. "It's a warning. Exit 96 doesn't lead to a rest area, it leads somewhere else, somewhere wrong, and if you take it, you'll die there just like the others. What others? The other drivers who have disappeared on this stretch of highway over the past 5 years. 12 of them, Anita. 12 drivers who took exit 96 looking for a place to rest, looking for a bathroom, looking for a place to park. None of them were ever seen again. Anita's hands were slick with sweat on the wheel. She thought about calling the police, but what would she tell them? Someone on the CB was warning her not to take an exit. If you know something about missing drivers, you need to report it to authorities, Anita said, trying to keep her voice steady. I have, the voice said, and now it sounded sad. Many times, they never listen. They search the area around exit 96, find nothing, and decide the drivers must have left on their own, must have abandoned their trucks. But I know better. I was the first one, you see, the first one to take that exit. You're not making sense. You took the exit and didn't survive. I didn't say I didn't survive, the voice corrected. I said the others didn't survive. I'm different, I'm caught between, trying to warn people before they make my mistake. Anita could see the exit sign approaching in her headlights now. Exit 96, rest area 5 miles. You see the sign, the voice said. It wasn't a question. You're thinking about stopping. You've been driving for 6 hours and you're tired, your back hurts. You need a bathroom break. The sign promises a rest area with facilities. It's tempting. He was right. Anita had been thinking about stopping soon. Her bladder was uncomfortably full and her lower back was starting to ache from sitting in the same position. I'm telling you, don't take it, the voice. Drive past. Wait for the next exit, the next town. Anywhere but exit 96. Why should I believe you? This could be some elaborate prank. Drive past the exit, the voice said. And I'll prove I'm telling the truth. I'll show you what's really there. Mile marker 91. The exit was 5 miles ahead. Anita was approaching the point where she'd need to make a decision. Her bladder was screaming at her to stop, but the fear in her gut was screaming louder to keep driving. 3 miles, the voice said softly. You're going to see other signs now. Signs advertising the rest area, clean facilities, free coffee, parking for trucks. They'll make it sound perfect. Ignore them. Sure enough, another sign appeared. Exit 96, rest area, clean facilities, free Wi-Fi, truck parking. See, the voice said. They know what to offer to make you stop, but it's a lie, all of it. Who's they? Anita demanded. I don't know, that's the truth. I never found out. I just know that the rest area isn't real. Or it's real in a way that doesn't follow normal rules. Time works differently there. Space works differently. The first time I took the exit, I was only there for what felt like 10 minutes. When I got back to the highway, 3 days had passed. My truck was still at the rest area, but I was back on the road, driving like I'd never stopped. Mile marker 93, 2 miles to the exit. The second time I took it because I was stupid, because I thought maybe I'd imagined the lost time. I was there for what felt like an hour. When I finally escaped, 2 weeks had passed. 2 weeks. My family had reported me missing. My company had written me off, and I couldn't explain where I'd been. Another sign. Exit 96, rest area, next right, last services for 40 miles. Last services for 40 miles, the voice echoed bitterly. That's the hook, make you think you'll regret not stopping. But I'm telling you, Anita, whatever regret you feel driving past will be nothing compared to what happens if you stop. Mile marker 94. 1 mile to go. What happened the third time? Anita asked, morbidly curious despite her fear. There was no third time, the voice said quietly. Because the second time I left that place, I looked in my mirror and saw myself still there, still parked at that rest area, still sitting in my truck waiting for something. That's when I realized I hadn't really left. Part of me was trapped there. Maybe all of me. Maybe what's driving around warning people is just an echo, a recording, a ghost in the CB radio. The exit was ahead now, clearly visible. A well-lit-off ramp, a sign pointing to rest area facilities. It looked completely normal, inviting. Anita's instincts warred with each other. Part of her desperately wanted to stop. Part of her was terrified to take that exit. Show me, she said suddenly. You said you'd prove you were telling the truth. Show me what's really there. Are you sure? Some things can't be unseen. Show me. All right, take the exit, but don't go all the way in. Stop at the top of the ramp. Don't drive into the rest area itself. Just look. Anita activated her turn signal and took the exit, her heart pounding. The off-ramp curved to the right, climbing slightly. At the top, there was a stop sign and a T intersection. To the right, a paved road led into what looked like a typical rest area, a parking lot, some buildings, landscaping. Except something was off about the perspective. The buildings looked too far away and too close at the same time. The parking lot seemed to extend into impossible distances, and the few vehicles she could see parked there, they were moving, but not in a way that made sense. Jittering, flickering like video with frames missing. "Do you see it?" the voice asked. "I see something's wrong with it. Now look up. Look at the sky above the rest area." Anita looked up through her windshield. Above the rest area, the sky was wrong. The stars were in different positions, different colors, arranged in patterns that hurt to look at. And something was moving among them, something vast and dark that blocked out constellations as it passed. "What the fuck is that?" Anita whispered. "I don't know," the voice said, "but it's been there every time I've seen this place. Waiting, watching, hungry maybe. I don't know if the rest area creates that thing, or if that thing creates the rest area. I just know they're connected. And I know that every driver who's parked in that lot has never been seen again." Anita threw her truck in reverse, backing down the off-ramp. It was illegal and dangerous, and she didn't care. She needed off this exit, needed back to the normal highway, needed away from whatever wrongness was sitting at the top of that ramp. She reached the highway, checked for traffic, and merged back on, heading east, leaving exit 96 behind her. "Thank you," the voice said, and now it sounded relieved, almost peaceful. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for trusting me." "Who are you?" Anita asked again. "What's your name?" "Michael Patterson. I was a driver for Western Transport, been missing since June 2017. Tell my family, tell them I tried to come home. Tell them I've been trying every night, warning people, trying to do something good with what happened to me." "I'll tell them," Anita promised. "I swear I'll tell them." "One more thing," Michael's voice said, fainter now, like the signal was weakening. "The exit moves. Next week it might be exit 96. Next month it might be 103 or exit 78. It's always a rest area that looks perfect, always the last services for however many miles. But if something feels wrong, if something feels off, trust that feeling. Trust it and drive past." "I will." "Good luck, Anita Rodriguez. Drive safe. Watch for the signs. And if you ever hear me on the radio again warning someone else, know that I'm still here. Still trying, still fighting." The radio went ecstatic and then silence. Anita drove straight through to Albuquerque, didn't stop until she was parked at her delivery point with the sun coming up. She filed a report with the New Mexico State Police about Michael Patterson's message. They were polite but dismissive. Michael Patterson had been a missing person case since 2017, they told her. Truck found abandoned on I-40 with no sign of the driver. They'd searched the area extensively. There was nothing to find. But Anita did her own research. Found 12 missing truck drivers on that stretch of I-40 over the past 5 years. Different companies, different months, different circumstances. The only thing they had in common was that they all disappeared without a trace somewhere along that highway. She drives that route regularly now, part of her regular rotation. And every time, around mile marker 89, she turns on her CB and listens. Sometimes she hears Michael's voice, warning other drivers. Sometimes she doesn't hear him at all, but she always watches for the exits. The rest areas that promise clean facilities and free coffee. The ones that advertise themselves as the last services for 40 miles or 50 miles or however many miles they need to tempt tired drivers into stopping. And whenever she sees one that feels wrong, that looks slightly off, that makes the hair stand up on the back of her neck, she drives past. Always drives past. Because somewhere in the spaces between exits, in the gaps on the map, there are places that aren't quite real. Places that exist to trap the unwary, to feed on the lost, to collect souls like specimens in a jar. And somewhere in one of those places, 12 drivers are still parked, still waiting, still hoping someone will come to help them. Michael Patterson is there too, Anita believes. But unlike the others, he's found a way to fight back. His voice on the CB, warning travelers, guiding them past danger. A ghost in the machine, protecting the living from making his mistake. Anita always responds now when she hears him. A simple "Roger that, thank you for the warning." Just so he knows someone heard him. So he knows his warnings matter. So he knows he's not completely lost. Because sometimes the thing keeping a ghost anchored to this world is the belief that they can still do some good. Still save someone. Still matter. And Michael Patterson matters. Every driver who passes that wrong exit because of his warning is proof of that. Every life saved is his small victory against whatever darkness took him. Story 7. The Hitchhiker Who Knew the Future. Carl Jensen had been driving trucks for 31 years without ever picking up a hitchhiker. Not once. It was his cardinal rule, the one his father had taught him when he first started driving. You never know who you're letting into your cab, never know what problems they might bring, never know if they're the kind of person who will pull a knife or a gun when you're 60 miles from anywhere. But the kid looked so young, so helpless, standing by the on-ramp to Route 80 in western Nebraska with his thumb out and a backpack at his feet. It was March 2021, cold enough that Carl could see his own breath despite the heating in his cab, and the kid was wearing just a hoodie and jeans. No coat, no gloves, no hat. He'd freeze to death if he was out there much longer. Carl pulled over. The kid jogged up to the passenger side and Carl rolled down the window. "Where you headed?" Carl called out. "East," the kid said. His face was baby smooth, couldn't have been more than 19 or 20. "Anywhere east." "I'm trying to get to Pennsylvania. I'm going to Ohio, can get you most of the way there." The kid's face lit up with relief. "That would be amazing, thank you so much." Carl unlocked the door and watched as the kid climbed up with his backpack. Up close, Carl could see he was shivering violently, his lips tinged blue with cold. How long had he been out there? "Get that heater vent pointed at you," Carl said, pulling back onto the highway. "You trying to catch pneumonia?" "Lost my jacket a couple days ago," the kid said, holding his hands up to the warm air. "Stupid mistake. Left it at a rest stop." "What's your name?" Peter Marsh." "Carl Jensen, nice to meet you, Peter." Carl studied the kid in his peripheral vision as he drove. Something seemed off, though he couldn't put his finger on it. Peter didn't look road-worn enough to have been hitchhiking for days. His clothes were dirty but not filthy. His face was clean-shaven. His hair looked recently washed. "Thanks again for stopping," Peter said. "I know most people don't pick up hitchhikers anymore." "They don't. I usually don't either. You just looked like you needed help." I do." Peter pulled his backpack onto his lap, unzipping it. "Can I ask you something, Carl?" "Sure." "Do you believe in predestination? Like the idea that the future is already written, already determined, just playing out roles that have already been decided?" Odd question, but Carl had met plenty of odd people over 3 decades of driving. "I believe in free will. I believe we make our own choices." Peter nodded thoughtfully, pulling something out of his backpack, a notebook, leather-bound and worn. "I used to believe that too, before." "Before what?" "Before I started dreaming about things before they happened, before I realized I could see the future." Carl glanced over at him. The kid looked completely serious, no hint of humor or irony. "Great." He picked up a crazy person. "Is that right?" Carl said neutrally, focusing back on the road. "I know how that sounds," Peter said, "but it's true. I dream about events before they occur, sometimes days before, sometimes weeks. They're incredibly detailed, incredibly specific, and they always come true. That's quite a gift." "It's not a gift," Peter said quietly. "It's a curse, because I dream about bad things, accidents, deaths, disasters, and there's nothing I can do to stop them. Every time I've tried to warn someone to change what I saw, it happens anyway. Sometimes my warning is what causes it to happen." Carl decided to humor him. "So what brings you to eastern Nebraska, Peter?" "You," Peter said simply. "I dreamed about you 3 days ago. Dreamed about you picking me up on Route 80 near Grand Island. Dreamed about our conversation. And I dreamed about what happens later tonight." "And what happens later tonight?" Peter opened his notebook, flipping through pages covered in handwriting. "At mile marker 387, approximately 9:47 p.m., you're going to see a car pulled over on the shoulder, a blue Honda Civic. A woman will be standing next to it, waving for help. You're going to pull over to help her." "Probably would," Carl admitted, "if someone needs help." "You shouldn't," Peter said. "Because at 9:53 p.m., a drunk driver is going to lose control and slam into the shoulder right where you'll be parked. The impact will kill you instantly, and the woman you stopped to help, and the drunk driver himself. 3 people dead because you stopped." Carl felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "That's pretty specific." "I told you, my dreams are detailed." Peter turned the notebook to show Carl. The page was covered in neat handwriting, describing exactly what he just said, along with sketches of the location, the vehicles, even rough drawings of the people involved. "Anyone can write a story," Carl said, though his voice was less certain now. "You have a daughter named Emily," Peter said, reading from another page. "She's a dental hygienist in Columbus, married to a guy named Travis, care for. They have a 2-year-old son named Marcus, your favorite grandson." Carl's hands tightened on the wheel. "How do you know that?" "It's in my dream. You're going to think about them right before the impact. You're going to hope they'll understand why you stopped to help that woman, why you did the right thing even though it killed you. Stop it. You have a scar on your left forearm from a knife fight in Omaha in 1994. You were defending a woman from her abusive ex-husband outside a truck stop. You got stabbed, but you probably saved her life." Carl unconsciously touched his left arm, where a 4-inch scar was hidden under his shirt sleeve. "How the fuck do you know that?" "Because in my dream, right before the impact, you're thinking about that night too. About how you've always tried to help people who needed it. About how it's been the guiding principle of your life." Carl pulled onto the shoulder, bringing his truck to a stop. His heart was hammering. "Get out." "I can't," Peter said sadly. "If I get out here, I'll freeze to death." "That's not in the dream, but I know it's true. I need to get to Pennsylvania. I need to warn someone else, try to save someone else, even though it never works." "How do you know about my daughter, about my scar?" "I told you, I dreamed the future. And in the future, I'm sitting in this truck having this conversation with you. And you tell me about your family, about your past. And then later tonight, you die." Carl sat there, engine idling, trying to process this. "If you know I'm going to die, why did you get in my truck?" "Because I have to try to stop it. Every time I try, I warn people, I tell them what I've seen. Sometimes they believe me, usually they don't, but it never matters because it happens anyway." Peter's voice cracked. "I dreamed about my parents dying in a house fire, warned them, begged them to check their smoke detectors, to be careful with candles. They died exactly how I dreamed it 3 weeks later. I dreamed about my girlfriend getting hit by a bus. I drove her to work that day to keep her safe. The bus jumped the curb and killed her on the sidewalk right in front of me. Jesus Christ. I've been on the road for 8 months following my dreams, trying to save people. Hasn't worked once, not once, but I have to keep trying because what else can I do? Just let people die without warning them." Carl put the truck back in gear and pulled onto the highway. "Okay, so what do I do? How do I avoid this accident you dreamed about?" "That's what I've been trying to figure out," Peter said, flipping through his notebook. "In every dream, you pull over at mile marker 387 at 9:47 p.m. The woman is there, the blue Civic is there, and 6 minutes later the drunk driver hits. So I just don't pull over. I thought that too. But here's the thing about my dream. Count for resistance. In the dream, we have this exact conversation. You say you won't pull over. But then we get to mile marker 387 and the woman is there and she's waving frantically and you see a child in the back seat of the car, a little boy, and you pull over because you can't leave a child stranded on a cold night. Then I'll drive past no matter what. In one version of the dream, you do drive past, but then you feel so guilty that you turn around at the next exit and come back. You arrive at 9:51 p.m. Still enough time for the drunk driver to hit you. Carl's mouth was dry. There has to be a way to change it. I've never found one, Peter said. Trust me, I've tried. Every dream I have, I try to find the way to prevent it. I warn people, I try to physically intervene, I've even called the police to report accidents before they happen. Nothing works. If anything, my interference makes things worse. They drove in silence for a while, Carl's mind racing. What if I just pull off at the next exit? Stop for a few hours, wait until well past 9:47. We're running behind schedule, Peter said, checking his watch. I told you I dreamed this conversation. Right now it's 7:32 p.m. We're about an hour from mile marker 387. If you stop now, you'll get antsy, worried about making your delivery time. You'll get back on the road, and we'll arrive at mile marker 387 at 9:47. How is that possible? I don't know, I think time adjusts. Things happen to keep the timeline on track. Traffic clears or backs up. You hit green lights or red lights. The universe corrects to maintain the predetermined future. Carl felt trapped, suffocated. So I'm going to die tonight, no matter what I do. That's what my dream shows. And you're sure about this? About your dreams always coming true? Peter nodded. Unfortunately, yes. I've documented 43 dreams over the past 8 months. 43 specific, detailed predictions. All 43 came true exactly as I dreamed them. Carl was quiet for a long time, watching the highway unspool in his headlights. Finally, he spoke. Tell me exactly what happens, every detail. Peter described it all. The mile marker, the blue Honda Civic, the woman mid-30s wearing a red jacket, the child in the back seat maybe 5 years old. The way Carl would pull over, set his brake, climb down from the cab. The conversation he'd have with the woman about her car troubles. And then at 9:53 p.m., the sound of tires screeching, the drunk driver's pickup truck swerving onto the shoulder at 70 miles an hour, the impact. You don't suffer, quietly. The coroner's report says death was instantaneous, if that helps. It doesn't. Carl checked his clock. 8:15 p.m. An hour and a half until the accident. What about you? You survive. I'm not in that part of the dream, Peter said. I don't know what happens to me. Maybe I die too. Maybe I'm thrown clear. The dream always ends with your death. They passed mile marker 350, getting closer. Carl tried to think of any possible way to change the outcome, but every scenario he imagined felt futile. If the kid was right, if the universe itself was conspiring to maintain the timeline, what chance did he have? Can I ask you something? Carl said. Of course. If you know you can't change anything, why do you keep trying? Why torture yourself? Peter looked out the window at the darkness passing by. Because maybe someday I'll dream about something I can change, or maybe I'll find the one person who can break the pattern, or maybe, he trailed off. Maybe what? Maybe I'm supposed to witness these deaths. Bear witness to them. Remember the people who die, make sure they're not forgotten. Maybe that's my purpose. Mile marker 370. 17 miles to go. Carl thought about Emily, about his grandson Marcus, about all the things he'd never get to do. He thought about that woman in the red jacket who didn't know she had less than an hour to live. About her child who'd lose his mother tonight. An idea occurred to him. Peter, you said in your dream I pull over because there's a child in the car. Yes. What if we get there early? What if we reach mile marker 387 before the woman arrives? Before 9:47, Peter frowned, thinking about it. I don't know. In the dream, we arrive at 9:47 and she's already there. But what if she's not there yet? What if we park there first? I'll pull over at 9:40, claim that spot. When the woman comes along, she'll have to park somewhere else. Maybe behind my truck, maybe ahead of it. Either way, when the drunk driver hits, he'll hit a different location. Peter's eyes widened. That's not in the dream. Because we're changing it, not trying to stop me from being there, but changing where everyone is positioned. But the drunk driver still hits at 9:53. Let him hit. But if the woman isn't where she's supposed to be, if I'm not standing where I'm supposed to be, maybe we survive. Peter flipped frantically through his notebook. This has never worked before. Every time I try to change things. Have you ever tried this specific change? This exact modification? No, Peter admitted. Then maybe it's worth trying. Mile marker 380. Carl accelerated, pushing his truck faster than was strictly legal. Get there early, needed to claim that position before the woman arrived. At 9:38 p.m., Carl pulled onto the shoulder at mile marker 387. He set his brake, turned on his hazard lights, and sat there, engine running. Now we wait, he said. Peter was gripping his notebook so hard his knuckles were white. This should be impossible. In my dream, we arrive at 9:47. And when does the woman arrive? I don't know. In the dream, she's already there when we pull up. At 9:44 p.m., headlights appeared behind them. A blue Honda Civic pulled onto the shoulder about 50 feet behind Carl's truck. A woman in a red jacket got out, looked under her hood, then started walking toward Carl's truck. That's her, Peter whispered. That's exactly her. Carl rolled down his window as the woman approached. You need help. My car just died, the woman said. I'm not sure what's wrong. Do you have a phone? I left mine at home. Don't get out, Peter said urgently. Stay in the truck. Hand her your phone through the window. Carl looked at him, saw the fear in the kid's eyes, and decided to trust him. He passed his phone through the window to the woman. Here, call whoever you need to call. My name's Carl. Thank you so much. I'm Jennifer. You got a kid in the car? Carl asked. Yes, my son Tyler. He's 5. Peter was checking his watch, his breathing rapid. 5 minutes. Jennifer was dialing on Carl's phone, talking to someone about car trouble, asking them to come help. Carl watched his mirrors, watched the road behind them. At 9:51 p.m., headlights appeared in the distance, weaving slightly. Peter saw them too. That's him. That's the drunk driver. Jennifer, Carl shouted out his window. Get away from the road, now into the ditch. Jennifer looked at him confused. What? Run now. The urgency in his voice got through to her. She dropped the phone and ran toward the ditch, stumbling in the darkness. The headlights behind them were getting closer, weaving more erratically. Peter grabbed Carl's arm. We need to go. We need to drive away right now. Carl shifted into gear, released his brake, and started pulling onto the highway. In his mirror, he saw the pickup truck swerve onto the shoulder, traveling impossibly fast. It clipped the back corner of Jennifer's Honda Civic, sending it spinning. Then the pickup continued forward, hit the spot where Carl's truck had been parked just seconds earlier, and slammed into the guardrail with a horrific sound of tearing metal. Carl kept driving for another mile before pulling over again, his hands shaking. Peter was staring out the back window, his face pale. We changed it, Peter whispered. We actually changed it. Carl grabbed his CB, reported the accident, gave their location. Then he and Peter sat there in silence, processing what had just happened. After a few minutes, Carl turned to look at Peter. You really can see the future. I can see a future, Peter said, but maybe not the future. Maybe there are multiple possibilities and my dreams only show one of them. Or maybe you needed to dream it so we'd know to change it. Maybe you seeing it was what made it possible to prevent it. Peter opened his notebook, staring at his detailed notes about tonight's events. If that's true, then all the others, all the people I couldn't save. Maybe they couldn't be saved, Carl said gently. Or maybe you needed all those failures to get to this success, to learn enough to finally change one. Emergency vehicles were arriving behind them, lights flashing in the mirrors. Carl and Peter gave statements to the police. The drunk driver was injured but alive. Jennifer and her son were shaken but unhurt. And Carl was alive, still had a future, still had time with his family. Before Peter hitchhiked off toward Pennsylvania, he showed Carl something in his notebook. A new entry written just moments before. I dreamed about next week, Peter said. There's going to be a fire in an apartment building in Pittsburgh. 12 people are going to die, but now I know I can change it. Now I know my dreams aren't prophecies. They're warnings, possibilities I'm meant to prevent. Good luck, kid. Thank you, Carl. You saved my life tonight just as much as I saved yours. Carl watched him walk toward the next on-ramp, thumb out, waiting for the next ride. He thought about the burden Peter carried, seeing disasters before they happened, trying to prevent tragedies one warning at a time. But now he knew it was possible. Now he knew that the future wasn't fixed, that one person could make a difference, that even predetermined fate could be altered with enough determination and a little bit of luck. Carl finished his delivery to Ohio, called Emily, told her he loved her. And every time he saw a hitchhiker after that, he wondered if it might be Peter Marsh, chasing his dreams across the country, turning prophecies into warnings, turning tragedies into narrow escapes. Saving lives one dream at a time. Story 8. The Endless Parking Lot. Rebecca Walsh had been driving for a pharmaceutical company for 9 years, mostly medical equipment and temperature-sensitive medications along the East Coast corridor. She prided herself on efficiency, knowing exactly where to stop for fuel, food, and rest breaks to optimize her delivery times. When she pulled into the enormous truck stop outside Richmond, Virginia, a.m. on a cold December night in 2022, she'd been there dozens of times before. She knew the layout by heart. Fuel island on the right, convenience store in the center, truck parking in the back lot. Except this time, the layout was different. Rebecca drove past the fuel island, heading toward the back where she knew there'd be empty parking spaces this time of night. But as she turned the corner past the main building, instead of the usual parking lot with space for maybe 40 trucks, she found herself facing something impossible. A vast parking area that stretched into the darkness far beyond what should have been possible. Hundreds of trucks were parked in neat rows, their running lights and cab lights creating a constellation of red, yellow, and white that extended as far as Rebecca could see. The parking lot seemed to go on forever, disappearing into a darkness that the overhead lights couldn't penetrate. "What the hell?" Rebecca muttered, slowing down. She knew for a fact that this truck stop had a relatively small lot. She'd been here enough times to be certain of that. But now it looked like an airport parking facility, massive and sprawling. She drove slowly down the first aisle looking for a spot. The trucks on either side were a mix of models and companies, all facing the same direction, all dark and silent despite their lights being on. No movement, no drivers visible in any of the cabs. Rebecca drove for what felt like 5 minutes, passing row after row of parked trucks, and still hadn't found the end of the lot. She checked her mirrors. The main building was no longer visible behind her, swallowed up by the darkness and the endless rows of trucks. A cold feeling started growing in her stomach. She turned down the next aisle, thinking she'd loop back around to the entrance. But the aisle just kept going. More trucks, more parking spaces, no end in sight. "Okay, this is weird," Rebecca said aloud, trying to keep her voice steady. She pulled into an empty space, set her air brake, and sat there for a moment trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The parking lot was too big, impossibly big. And now that she was stationary, she realized something else. It was absolutely silent. No engine noise, no generators running, no sound of traffic from the nearby highway. Just profound, oppressive silence. Rebecca grabbed her phone, thinking she'd call someone, report the weirdness. The screen showed full signal, but when she tried to dial, nothing happened. The call wouldn't connect. She tried several times with the same result. "Fine," she said, opening her cab door. "I'll just walk back to the main building. Clear my head, figure out what's going on." She climbed down from her truck, and the silence hit her like a physical weight. Her boots on the asphalt were the only sound in the entire parking lot. No wind, no rustling, no ambient noise of any kind. Rebecca started walking back toward where the main building should be, following the aisle between parked trucks. On either side, the cabs were dark and empty, though she could see that many had their sleeper curtains closed, suggesting drivers sleeping inside. She passed dozens of trucks, then hundreds. The main building never appeared. The parking lot just kept going, row after row disappearing into darkness ahead and behind. Panic started creeping up Rebecca's spine. She turned down another aisle, walking faster now. Her phone still showed signal but wouldn't make calls. Her GPS showed her location as the truck stopped, but the map view showed the normal small parking lot, not this endless sprawl. A sound made her jump, the squeal of air brakes. Rebecca spun around and saw, about 50 yards ahead, a truck pulling into a parking space. Relief flooded through her. Another person, someone who might know what was going on. She jogged toward the truck, watching as the lights turned off, the engine died. The driver's door opened and a man climbed down, a heavy-set guy with a beard and a baseball cap. "Hey," Rebecca called out. "Excuse me." The man turned to look at her and Rebecca's voice died in her throat. His face was completely blank, not expressionless but actually featureless. Where his eyes, nose, and mouth should have been, there was just smooth, unbroken skin. The man turned away and walked between the rows of trucks, disappearing into the darkness. Rebecca stood frozen, her heart hammering. What the fuck was that? She spun in a circle, looking at all the trucks surrounding her. The sleeper curtains were closed on most of them, but a few were open, and now she could see shapes in those cabs. People sitting motionless behind the wheels, perfectly still, all with the same blank, featureless faces. Rebecca ran. She didn't know which direction, didn't care, just needed to move, needed to get away from those things that looked like people but weren't. Her boots pounded on the asphalt, her breathing harsh and panicked in the oppressive silence. She ran for what felt like 10 minutes, weaving between trucks, changing directions randomly, desperate to find the edge of this impossible parking lot. But every aisle looked identical, every row of trucks the same, and the darkness ahead never lifted. Finally, gasping for breath, Rebecca stopped next to a Kenworth with Oregon plates. She bent over, hands on her knees, trying to catch her breath, down the panic threatening to overwhelm her. A sound reached her ears, voices. Multiple people talking, too far away to make out words, but definitely human conversation. Rebecca straightened up, trying to pinpoint the direction. There, somewhere off to her left between the rows of trucks. She walked toward the sound, moving carefully, ready to run if she saw more of those blank-faced things. The voices got louder. Real voices, she was sure of it now. A woman laughing, a man telling a story, the normal sounds of human interaction. Rebecca rounded a corner and found them. A group of about 8 people standing in a circle between the rows of trucks, talking and gesturing like they were at a social gathering. They looked completely normal, faces intact, wearing various types of clothes from different eras. One woman was in a dress that looked straight from the 1970s. A man wore a leisure suit. Another driver had on modern clothes with a company logo from a trucking firm Rebecca recognized. "Hello," Rebecca called out tentatively. The group turned to look at her and Rebecca felt a wash of relief. Their faces were normal, expressive, human. "Oh, you're new," the woman in the 70s dress said, smiling warmly. "Welcome, don't worry, you'll get used to it here." "Used to what?" Rebecca asked, walking closer. "What is this place? How do I get out?" "Out." Man in the leisure suit laughed, but it wasn't a friendly sound. "There's no out, honey. This is where we stay now." "I don't understand." "The parking lot," a younger woman explained, stepping forward. She wore modern clothes and had a name tag that said Jennifer. "It's not a regular parking lot, it's something else, a trap maybe, or a collection point, we're not really sure. But once you drive into it, you can't leave." "That's insane. I'm leaving right now. I'm getting in my truck and driving out." "You can try," Jennifer said sympathetically. "We all did, but you'll just drive in circles. The exit doesn't exist anymore, not for us." Rebecca backed away from the group. "You're all crazy. This is crazy." "Check your fuel gauge," the woman in the 70s dress said. "How much fuel did you have when you drove in?" Rebecca thought about it. "Half a tank, maybe a little more." "And when you looked at it just before you started walking?" Rebecca had glanced at her gauges when she parked. The fuel gauge had shown empty. How was that possible? She'd driven maybe 10 minutes through the parking lot, not nearly enough to burn through half a tank. "The parking lot takes things," a man with a thick southern accent explained. "Takes fuel, takes battery charge, takes phone signal though it pretends you have one, takes your way out. Eventually it takes time. You'll notice that soon. Check your watch or phone." Rebecca looked at her phone. It showed 2:47 a.m., but that couldn't be right. She de-entered the parking lot around 2 a.m. and she'd been here for at least 45 minutes. The time should show close to 3 a.m. or maybe even later. "It's stuck," she whispered. "Not stuck," Jennifer corrected. "Moving differently, time works wrong here. Sometimes it goes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes it seems to stop completely. We've been trying to figure out the pattern, but there isn't one. At least not one we can understand." "How long have you been here?" Rebecca asked. "I don't know," Jennifer said. "Could be days, could be years, it's hard to tell. I drove in thinking I'd get some sleep, woke up and couldn't find my way out. That was a while ago, I don't really remember exactly." "I've been here since 1974, the woman in the dress said cheerfully. "Or at least that's what year it was when I drove in. Gerald Ford was president. I was hauling textiles from North Carolina to New York. Stopped here for coffee and a bathroom break. My name's Dorothy, by the way." "That's 48 years, Rebecca said, her voice shaking. "Is it? Doesn't feel like it. Feels like maybe a few months. Time's funny here." Rebecca looked around at the group. 8 people from different decades, all trapped in an endless parking lot that shouldn't exist. "What about food, water? How are you alive?" "Don't need them," the man in the leisure suit said. "Don't get hungry, don't get thirsty, don't get tired unless we want to. The parking lot provides. Everything's taken care of, you'll see." "I'm not staying here," Rebecca said firmly. "I'm finding my truck and I'm driving out." "Good luck," Jennifer said, not unkindly. "But when you end up back here after driving in circles for hours, we'll still be around. We're not going anywhere. None of us are." Rebecca turned and ran again, desperate to prove them wrong, to find her truck, to escape this nightmare. She ran for what felt like hours, past endless identical rows of trucks, through pools of light and patches of darkness, always looking for something familiar, some landmark, anything to orient herself. She found her truck eventually, or at least a truck that looked exactly like hers, same company, same number on the door. But when she climbed in, her belongings were gone from the cab. The seat was adjusted differently, and when she tried to start the engine, nothing happened. The battery was dead, the fuel gauge on empty. Rebecca tried truck after truck, climbing into dozens of cabs, trying to find one that would start, one that she could use to drive out of this place. But they were all the same. Dead batteries, empty fuel tanks, keys that turned but engines that wouldn't catch. She found herself back at the group of people, though she had no idea how. They were still standing in their circle, talking and laughing like they were at a party, like being trapped in an endless parking lot for decades was perfectly normal. "Told you," Jennifer said gently when she saw Rebecca's face. "There's no way out. Not by driving, not by walking. We're here until, well, we don't know until what, maybe forever." "What are those things?" Rebecca asked, sinking to the ground, exhaustion finally hitting her. "The ones with no faces." "The attendants," Dorothy said. "That's what we call them. They drive and sometimes park trucks, wander around. We don't know what they are, ghosts maybe, or manifestations of the parking lot itself. They don't hurt anyone, just ignore us completely." "Why are we here? What does this place want?" "No idea," the southern man said. "We've got theories. Some think it's purgatory, a place for sinners to work off their karmic debt. Some think it's alien, some kind of collection point for study. Some think it's a dimensional anomaly, a spot where reality got folded wrong. I don't think it matters. We're here, and here is where we'll stay." Rebecca sat there among the group of trapped drivers, watching as faceless attendants occasionally appeared to park new trucks or wander between the rows. Time did strange things. Sometimes the conversation felt like it lasted hours, other times only minutes. She couldn't tell anymore. New drivers appeared periodically, pulling into the endless lot, parking, then discovering they couldn't leave. Some panicked, some accepted it quickly, Most went through the same denial and desperation Rebecca had experienced. The group grew larger, more drivers from more eras, all stuck in the same impossible place. Rebecca tried everything to escape. She kept detailed notes on her phone, trying to map the parking lot, but the rows seemed to shift and change when she wasn't looking. She tried walking in a straight line for hours, but always ended up back where she started. She tried staying awake for days, thinking maybe the lot only worked when you slept, but it made no difference. Eventually, she became like the others, accepted her place in the endless parking lot, joined the social groups that formed between the rows of trucks, learned the strange rules of a place where time didn't flow normally, where physical needs didn't exist, where the only company was other trapped drivers and faceless attendants. Somewhere in the real world, Rebecca Walsh was reported missing. Her truck was found abandoned at a truck stop outside Richmond, Virginia, parked in the back lot. The engine was dead, the fuel tank empty, all her belongings still inside. Security footage showed her driving in, showed her leaving. The police investigated, found nothing. Eventually, the case went cold, just like dozens of other truck drivers who disappeared from that same location over the past 50 years. But in the endless parking lot, Rebecca walks the rows of trucks, talks with other trapped drivers, watches new arrivals discover their fate. She's learned to accept it, this strange existence outside of normal time and space, this collection of lost travelers who took a wrong turn into somewhere that looks like a truck stop, but is actually something else entirely. Something that gathers drivers and their trucks the way a collector might gather stamps or coins. Something that holds them forever in perfect preservation, suspended in a moment that never ends, trapped in a parking lot that extends beyond the boundaries of normal geography into a space where the rules of reality don't apply. The attendants continue their work, parking new trucks, wandering the rows with their blank faces, never speaking, never acknowledging the trapped drivers who watch them with a mixture of fear and resignation. And somewhere right now, another tired driver is pulling into what looks like an ordinary truck stop, thinking they'll just park for a few hours, get some rest, and continue on their route in the morning. They'll drive past the fuel island, head toward the back lot, and find themselves in a parking area that seems unusually large. They'll drive and drive, looking for an empty space, passing row after row of trucks, wondering why the lot seems so much bigger than they remembered. And then they'll park. And they'll try to leave. And they'll discover, just like all the others, that some parking lots you can check into, but you can never check out. Welcome to the collection. Welcome to the endless lot. Welcome to forever. Story 9, The Road That Remembered. Hector Ramirez had been running freight between Tucson and El Paso for 12 years, and Highway 10 was like an old friend to him. He knew every curve, every exit, every quirk of that desert highway. So when he found himself on a section of road he'd never seen before, despite having driven this route hundreds of times, he knew something was very wrong. It was July 2020, middle of the day, temperature hovering around 108 degrees. Hector's refrigerated trailer was hauling produce, and he was making good time through southern New Mexico. He passed through Las Cruces about 20 minutes ago and should have been approaching the exit for Mesilla when he noticed the highway looked different. The asphalt was newer, darker. The markers were in a style he'd never seen before, with different numbers that didn't match his GPS. And most disturbing of all, there were vehicles on the side of the road. Dozens of them. Old vehicles, decades old, all pulled over on the shoulder with their hoods up or doors open, clearly abandoned. Hector slowed down, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. A Plymouth Fury from the late 70s, a Ford Galaxy from the 60s, a Studebaker that had to be from the 50s, all in various states of decay, paint faded by sun and sand, tires flat, windows dusty. "What the hell is this?" Hector muttered, checking his GPS. According to the screen, he was exactly where he should be, on I-10 between Las Cruces and El Paso. But the GPS couldn't explain the abandoned cars, or the strange mile markers, or the fact that the road itself looked wrong. As he drove, more abandoned vehicles appeared. Not just cars, but trucks too. Old semis from decades past, parked on the shoulder, some with their cargo doors open, loads long since gone. Hector counted at least 30 abandoned vehicles in the span of 5 miles. Then he saw the first person. A man stood next to a broken-down Chevrolet Bel Air, hood up, staring at the engine. He wore slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and his hair was styled in a pompadour. He looked like he'd stepped out of a 1950s magazine. Hector slowed down, considering stopping to offer help, but something about the scene felt wrong. The man wasn't moving, just standing there perfectly still, one hand on the car's fender, staring down at the engine block. As Hector's truck passed, the man's head turned to follow him, but his body remained frozen in place, creating an impossible angle. Hector felt his stomach drop. That wasn't normal. That wasn't human. He accelerated, putting distance between himself and the frozen man. But ahead, there were more of them. A woman in a 1960s dress standing next to a Cadillac, perfectly still, her head turning to track Hector's movement. A family of 4 frozen mids stride next to a station wagon, their heads swiveling in unison as he passed. Okay, this is bad, Hector said, his hands gripping the wheel hard enough to hurt. He grabbed his CB radio. This is Ramirez eastbound on I-10. Anyone out there hearing something weird? Anyone else seeing abandoned cars and people? Static answered him, thick and full of interference. He tried again, cycling through channels. Nothing but static and occasional bursts of what sounded like voices speaking backwards. His phone, no signal. His GPS was still working, but showed him on normal I-10, which clearly wasn't where he actually was. More frozen people appeared, dozens of them, all standing next to abandoned vehicles, all perfectly still except for their heads that turned to watch him pass. Men in suits, women in dresses, children in clothing from different decades, all trapped in mid-gesture, all staring at him with eyes that didn't blink. Then Hector saw the sign. It was old, weathered, barely standing, but readable. Welcome to the Highway of Last Moments. Established 1952. The Highway of Last Moments, Hector repeated. What the fuck does that mean? As if in answer, his radio crackled to life. Not static this time, but a voice. An old voice, crackling with age and interference. The road remembers, the voice said. Every breakdown, every accident, every tragedy, the road remembers and preserves them. Welcome, driver. Welcome to the collection of sorrows. Who is this? Hector demanded. I am the road, the voice said. I am the asphalt and the sand, the heat and the distance. I am every mile marker and every painted line. And I remember everything that has happened on my surface since the day I was built. Hector wanted to dismiss this as a prank, some elaborate joke, but the evidence was all around him. The frozen people, the abandoned vehicles, the impossible preservation of moments from decades past. Let me go, Hector said. I don't belong here. Everyone belongs here, the voice said. Everyone who drives my length becomes part of my memory. You've driven me hundreds of times, Hector Ramirez. I know your truck, know your route, know your thoughts as you pass mile after mile. You're already part of my collection, you just didn't know it yet. I'm leaving, I'm getting off at the next exit. There are no exits here, only memories, only preserved moments of difficulty and despair. Look around you, see what I've collected over the decades. Against his will, Hector really looked at the frozen scenes on either side of the highway. A family whose car had overheated, standing around the open hood, father holding a water jug. A trucker from the 70s sitting on his bumper, head in his hands, next to a truck with a blown tire. A young couple from the 80s, holding hands next to their broken-down car, looking worried. Each scene was a moment of trouble, a snapshot of someone's bad day, preserved forever by this impossible road. Why? Hector asked. Why do this? Because roads are more than pavement, the voice said. We're witnesses to human struggle. We see people at their most vulnerable, their most desperate. We absorb their fear, frustration, and desperation. And some roads that have seen enough suffering become aware, become collectors, become something more than simple pathways. You're insane. I'm ancient. I was built in 1952, and in that time I've seen thousands of breakdowns, hundreds of accidents, dozens of deaths. Every moment of suffering on my surface has fed me, made me stronger, made me more real. And now I preserve those moments, keep them forever, add them to my collection. Hector saw a new scene ahead. A semi-truck, modern, same model as his own, pulled over with hazard lights flashing. And standing next to it, looking at a flat tire, was himself. Hector Ramirez, wearing the same clothes he was wearing right now, frozen in the act of kneeling down to inspect the damage. Hector slammed on his brakes, bringing his truck to a shuddering stop. His heart was pounding. That was him. That was definitely him, down to the scar on his left hand and the way he wore his baseball cap slightly crooked. That hasn't happened yet, the voice said. But it will. You'll have a flat tire in 3 more miles. You'll pull over, inspect the damage, realize you can't change it without help. And while you're there, vulnerable and stranded, I'll add you to my collection. I'll preserve that moment of frustration and fear forever. No, Hector said. No, I won't let that happen. You can't prevent it. The road knows what will happen on its surface. The road determines fate for those who travel it. In 3 miles, your front driver's side tire will blow. You'll have no choice but to stop. Hector put his truck in gear and started driving again, very carefully, watching the road ahead for any debris or hazards that might cause a blowout. He'd driven on damaged tires before, nursed trucks to safety on barely functioning equipment. He could feel problems before they became catastrophic. If a tire was going to blow, he'd know. Mile marker 187, 2 more miles until the predicted blowout. The frozen people and abandoned vehicles were still everywhere, more of them now, decades of preserved suffering lining both sides of the highway. Hector tried not to look at them, focused entirely on the road and his truck's performance. Mile marker 188, 1 more mile. Hector's truck was running fine. No vibrations, no pulling to one side, no warning signs of tire failure. Maybe the road was wrong. Maybe he could avoid this fate. You can't escape memory, the voice said. The road has already recorded your breakdown. It's already happened in the timeline that matters. You're just catching up to that moment. Fuck your timeline, Hector growled. Mile marker 189. Was it? This was where the blowout should happen. Hector held his breath, gripping the wheel, ready for the sudden loss of control that would signal a blown tire. The mile marker passed. His truck kept running smoothly. I'm still going, Hector said triumphantly. Your prediction was wrong. Was it? The voice said, sounding amused. Hector looked in his mirror and felt his blood run cold. Behind him, maybe a 1/4 mile back, he could see his truck. His exact truck, same company markings, same license plate, pulled over on the shoulder with hazard lights flashing. And standing next to it was himself, looking at a blown tire. What the fuck? Hector whispered. The road preserves what will happen, the voice said. From my perspective, it's already occurred. The moment exists in my memory even if your linear experience hasn't reached it yet. You're driving away from your own preserved moment, but it exists nonetheless. You're part of my collection now, Hector Ramirez. Forever standing on my shoulder, frustrated and afraid, a monument to human vulnerability. Hector's truck was still running fine, but now he could see more copies of himself behind him. Multiple versions, all pulled over, all dealing with various breakdowns and problems, all frozen in moments of difficulty. Different versions of his future or alternate timelines where things had gone wrong. How do I get off this road? Hector demanded. You drive until you run out of road, the voice said. Or until you break down and join your preserved selves on my shoulder. Either way, you're mine now. Part of my collection, part of my memory, part of what I am. Hector drove faster, desperate to find some way off this impossible highway. But the road just kept going straight and empty ahead, lined with decades of preserved tragedy behind and beside him. His fuel gauge started dropping. Rapidly. Too rapidly. He'd had 3/4 of a tank, but now it was showing half, then a quarter, then nearly empty. The road was taking his fuel the same way it took moments and memories. "I preserve everything," the voice said, "including the fuel you need to escape. You'll run out soon, you'll coast to a stop, and then you'll become another permanent fixture on my shoulder, another memory preserved forever." Hector's engine started sputtering. The fuel gauge read empty. Impossible. He just filled up in Las Cruces. His truck slowed, coasting, no power left. Hector guided it to the shoulder, next to all the other abandoned vehicles, next to all the frozen people. He set his air brake and sat there, engine dead, out of fuel, stranded on an impossible road that collected suffering. He opened his door and climbed down, his feeling strange, like he was moving through water. Around him, the other frozen people stood in their permanent poses. A woman from the 1940s holding a baby. A man from the 1970s changing a tire. All of them trapped, preserved, made permanent by the road's memory. Hector felt his own movement slowing, his muscles locking, his thoughts becoming sluggish. The road was preserving him, adding him to its collection, making his moment of breakdown eternal. His last thought before he froze completely was that somewhere, on the normal version of I-10, drivers were passing mile marker 189 without incident, unaware that just beneath or beside or within their reality, the highway of last moments collected suffering and preserved it forever, building its collection one stranded driver at a time. They say that sometimes, on very hot days when the air shimmers with heat and distance becomes fluid, drivers on I-10 in southern New Mexico see things that shouldn't be there. Old cars pulled over that vanish when approached. People standing motionless by the roadside who disappear when you look directly at them. Versions of the highway that look almost right but slightly wrong. The highway of last moments exists in the spaces between, in the overlap of memory and reality, in the heat shimmer place where past and present blur. It collects the bad moments, the breakdowns and fears, the vulnerability and desperation of every driver who's ever struggled on that desert highway. And somewhere on its impossible length, Hector Ramirez stands next to his truck, frozen mid-gesture, looking at a tire that will never be changed, experiencing a moment of frustration that will never end, part of the road's collection, part of its memory. Forever. Story 10. Something was out there in the snow. Leonard Morrison had been driving through winters for 28 years, hauling loads across the northern states where snow was a fact of life from November through April. He'd driven through blizzards, ice storms, whiteouts, and every other kind of winter hell that nature could throw at a trucker. He thought he'd seen everything the cold season had to offer. He was wrong. It was February 2023, and Leonard was hauling electronics from Minneapolis to Billings on Highway 94, cutting across the frozen emptiness of North Dakota. A late winter storm had moved in faster than predicted, and by 9 p.m., Leonard was driving through near whiteout conditions, visibility reduced to maybe 50 feet in the swirling snow. The temperature had dropped to 15 below zero, and the wind was howling hard enough to make his trailer sway. He should have stopped, found a place to wait out the storm. But Leonard was stubborn and experienced, and he'd driven through worse. Or so he thought. Around 10 p.m., maybe an hour west of Fargo, Leonard noticed something moving alongside his truck. At first, he thought it was just snow blowing in patterns, the way drifts sometimes seem to have shapes in bad storms. But the movement was too consistent, too purposeful. Something was keeping pace with his truck, running through the snow on the passenger side, matching his 40-mile-per-hour speed exactly. Leonard leaned forward, squinting through the passenger window, trying to make out what he was seeing. The shape was large, maybe the size of a person, but it moved wrong. Too fluid, too fast, joints bending in ways that didn't match human anatomy. Just the storm, Leonard muttered to himself. Just snow and shadows and tired eyes. But the shape didn't disappear. It kept pace with him, occasionally visible as a dark silhouette against the white snow, sometimes fading into the storm only to reappear seconds later. And now Leonard could hear something over the wind, a sound that sent chills down his spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. Breathing, deep, ragged breathing, keeping rhythm with his truck's speed. Leonard grabbed his CB radio. "This is Morrison westbound on 94. Anyone else out in this storm?" Static answered him. He tried again, switching channels. Nothing. The shape was closer now, running right alongside his passenger door. Leonard could see more details through the snow. Something tall and thin with too many joints, arms that hung too low, a head that seemed to be all wrong, elongated and featureless. "What the hell are you?" Leonard whispered. As if in answer, the thing turned its head to look at him. Where a face should have been, there was just smooth whiteness, like snow packed into the shape of a head. But despite having no visible eyes, Leonard knew it was looking at him. Could feel its attention like a physical weight. Then it smiled. A crack appeared in the smooth white surface, opening impossibly wide, revealing darkness inside. No teeth, no tongue, just empty blackness that seemed to swallow light. Leonard floored the accelerator, his truck surging forward, pushing 50 miles per hour despite the dangerous conditions. The thing beside him accelerated too, matching his speed effortlessly, running through the deep snow like it was nothing. He tried to lose it by changing lanes, swerving back and forth, but it followed, sometimes on his right, sometimes on his left, always staying close, always keeping pace. The breathing sound got louder, more insistent. Then there was a second one. Leonard saw it in his driver's side mirror, another tall shape running behind him, catching up rapidly. It moved in that same wrong way, joints articulating impossibly, body flowing through the storm like liquid. "No, no, no," Leonard chanted, his hands white-knuckled on the wheel. He was going too fast for these conditions, risking a jackknife or worse, but terror had overridden common sense. A third shape appeared ahead, standing directly in the middle of the highway. Leonard laid on his horn, praying it would move. It didn't. As he got closer, he could see it was the same as the others, tall, thin, wrong. It stood perfectly still in the driving snow, that terrible smile crack visible even from a distance. Leonard swerved at the last second, his trailer fishtailing dangerously, tires losing traction on the ice beneath the snow. He fought for control, managed to keep the truck on the road, and when he looked back, the shape in the highway was gone. But now there were more of them. 5, 6, maybe more, running alongside his truck on both sides, pacing him perfectly, their breathing creating a horrible chorus that cut through even the howl of the wind. They were playing with him, Leonard realized. They could catch him anytime they wanted. This was a game. His phone rang, making him jump so badly he nearly lost control again. He grabbed it with one hand, seeing unknown caller on the screen. "Hello," he said, his voice shaking. "Turn off your lights." The voice was strange, crackling with static but identifiably human. "Turn off all your lights right now." "Who is this?" "Someone who survived them. Turn off your lights. They hunt by light in the storm. Darkness confuses them." "I can't drive in the dark in this weather." "You can't outrun them either. Turn off your lights or they'll get inside your truck. I've seen them do it. They fold themselves impossibly small and come in through the vents, through the gaps around the doors. Turn off your lights and stop moving. It's your only chance." The call ended. Leonard looked at the shapes running alongside him. There were at least a dozen now, a whole pack of them, and they were getting closer, their two long arms reaching toward his truck. Saying a prayer, Leonard killed his headlights, running lights, everything. The world went completely black except for the faint glow of his instrument panel. He started slowing down, carefully, gently, trying not to brake too hard on the ice. The breathing sounds got confused, rising and falling in pitch. Through his windows, barely visible in the Leonard could see the shapes slowing down too, their movements becoming erratic, uncertain. His truck came to a stop in the middle of the highway. Leonard turned off the instrument lights, plunging himself into absolute darkness. He sat there, hands still gripping the wheel, barely breathing, listening to the storm and the things outside. For several minutes there was only the wind. Then he heard them moving around his truck, their breathing closer now. Something scraped along his trailer, a sound like fingernails on metal. Something tapped against his window, slow and deliberate. Leonard kept perfectly still, eyes squeezed shut, every muscle tensed. The tapping continued. Something was testing his truck, looking for a way in. He heard that scraping sound move from his trailer to his cab, circling around, searching. Multiple somethings all around him, patient and thorough. Then mercifully the sounds began to fade. The breathing got quieter, more distant. The scraping stopped. Leonard sat in his dark cab for another 10 minutes, not daring to move, barely daring to breathe. Finally, he risked turning on just his cab light, the small interior bulb above his head. Nothing outside his windows but swirling snow. The shapes were gone. His phone rang again. Same number. "Are they gone?" Leonard asked immediately. "If you can't hear them anymore, yes. They don't stay interested long if they can't find you. They'll move on looking for other lights in the storm." "What the hell are they?" "I don't know," the voice said. "I'm a climatologist. I've been studying winter storms in this region for 15 years. Started hearing reports about 5 years ago. Drivers seeing things in the snow, shapes that followed them, things that hunted in the whiteouts. Most people thought they were hallucinations, ice crystals creating optical illusions, but I've seen them myself, documented them, they're real." "Where do they come from?" "I think they've always been here," the voice said. "Ancient things that live in the deep cold in the heart of winter storms. The indigenous people of this region have stories about them going back centuries. Snow walkers, storm hunters, different names, same thing. They come out during the worst blizzards when visibility is almost zero, when people are most vulnerable. Why don't more people know about them?" "Because